And in 3, 2, 1. I got with me today Wayne Loftin. He's an EMT and he's soon to be a paramedic. Today we're going to be talking about the psychological toll that being an EMT and that sort of work takes on your psyche.
Yes, sir, we are. It's kind of a hard thing to start out on. It's a pretty heavy topic. I would say as far as me personally, I guess I'll just dive into my personal experience that being in EMS and becoming an EMT over the past 3.5 years has improved my personal mental health, and there are negative sides, I would say, but they don't outweigh the benefits for me, and I wouldn't want to do anything else.
And what would the benefits be?
I would say like a sense of meaning and purpose in your work, and that, the hardships of doing it don't outweigh the benefits, or the sense of self-satisfaction, it's a little bit of, that's kind of shaky ground, because you don't want to be too into yourself and be like, man, I'm, Mr. Lifesaver. I can, and that's when you make mistakes. But there also has to be that self-confidence that I'm going to, do what I need to do to handle this situation and think strategically and not, there's a guy I work with actually was telling me about, there's a term for it called blackout. And it's where people, they're on a call and they're trying to do the best that they can. And they're too drummed up, they're too flustered, and they make mistakes. They'll grabbing for the wrong thing, it turns into a mess, and at a certain point they're not doing anything productive. They're just
they call it blackout?
Yeah, well, that's what he calls it. I don't know if that's like the standard term.
Have you ever experienced it?
Yeah. Oh, totally. And not so much, maybe once or twice on actual calls, but more like in testing scenarios, I would say.
Is it just
that's what does it to me worse? Like as far as, making me like, you can't think too much.
Yeah.
You got to be very, it has to be very
in the moment
and not overthought.
Okay, so it's like an overwhelming emotion or stress?
How would I put that into viable terms? It's not overwhelming in the moment if you're focused and you're in the right mindset. But afterwards it's kind of like a letdown. But if you're super drummed up, then that letdown is going to be harder. Okay. So, and I think the longer that I've done it, the less of that feeling that I have. So, at the very beginning, it would be a total adrenaline rush every single time, every call, even if it wasn't that serious. It would be like going there with lights and sirens. It was just like heart pounding, ready to, kind of super, super drummed up. And as time went on, about maybe I'd say a year and a little more than a year in of actually kind of, getting really baptized in it and not being green and having to do stuff for myself and make my own mistakes, that it kind of subsided to a certain degree and kind of has continued to.
Do you think you're getting numbed to the traumatic experiences?
And I kind of, you could put it in that terms, but I don't think that really does it justice, because I don't personally feel traumatized, working in EMS. How do I put that? I don't feel like it's some weight that I carry around with me or something that I'm like, poor me, where this is gonna, something I have to struggle with. It's actually something I truly enjoy.
I imagine before you're an EMT, if you see a car crash or someone fall off a bridge or something, it'd be horrific and kind of completely throw your day. But now that you've been it, now that you know what to do, and that was really what spurred me forward into doing it, was I didn't want to not know what to do. Do you think that's a good or a bad thing, that you're not as emotionally charged from moments of extreme terror?
I think that as far as for me personally, it's a good thing, and as far as the quality of my work, it's a good thing, but it's just one of those hurdles that you have to get over. It's kind of one of those, it's like a step along the way. And a big thing in EMS is mentors, if you have a department or a company or whatever, and the people that are higher up aren't mentoring the people below them, things will fall apart. Okay. That you need, to some degree at the very beginning, you need your hand held through basically everything, because it's hard and scary and it's intense, and you don't, you need to know that there's someone there that'll pick it up for you if you can't do it. Mm-hmm. And then once you have people like that support you, and then that's where you kind of make that jump into doing things on your own, and under their supervision, of course. But, you know, and from that, you kind of build confidence.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, it's definitely, it's not for everybody, but I think that it's for a lot more people than do it. Mm-hmm. That there's a lot of people that kind of, and I guess that's one of the reasons that I came on today, was kind of to have an honest conversation about that. For some people that might be like, I would love to do that, but I don't think I could deal with the traumatic experience of, you know, of going to car crashes and overdoses and accidents and, you know, all those things. But I think that it's kind of, that's a very like, it's a very complex topic. Well, there's a lot in the details there.
Yeah. What's your thought pattern that makes seeing these things not affect you in a PTSD kind of deriving way?
You know, I would say like it's a lot of mindset going in, you know, that like that you're doing it voluntarily. You know, it's not like, I would say the difference between like a true traumatic experience and what I see and deal with in EMS is that I signed up for that. And not just like, you know, like I could have quit the last call I was on. You know, I could have been like, I'm not going to do this anymore, but I chose to stay and go on the next one. And I think that voluntary choice makes a huge difference. You know, that if you have someone and you subject them to something traumatic like that, and they're unknowing and unwilling, you know, they're not ready for this, that it's just cast upon them, that makes it astronomically harder to deal with.
Yeah.
And that if you are fully aware and competent and know the situation in which you're putting yourself or could be putting yourself, whatever that situation might be, that like by de facto it becomes somewhat easier to deal with in your own mind. You know, that like you can shoulder voluntary things more easily than you can something
that just happened to you, loss of control. Because
yes.
you kind of brought on that burden and have the control.
Yes.
I'm curious, if you did get PTSD, would you go to therapy, or do you have any stigmas against it?
You know, I would, and I think there are some things that are kind of unavoidable that I think people like, I mean, when you see terrible things, you will have nightmares about it once in a while, or you'll have moments where something like a smell or something like that reminds you of what was happening, and you kind of, you know, jump back to it a little bit. But I think that's kind of like a normal human emotion, and it's kind of heightened by the intensity of those sort of things. Mm-hmm. But if it started to affect my day-to-day life or my relationships with people around me, then I would seek help.
Have you seen that happen to any of your coworkers or friends?
You know, I actually have, I'm trying to think, you know, I haven't seen anyone totally fall off the rails or like, you know, no one that I knew really personally, but I've lots of people I know have struggled with calls that they've been on, and lots of people have, you know, taken respites or breaks because of calls, or they've, you know, however they've dealt with it. And I know people that have had to seek, you know, not had to, but chose to seek help for.
And what does one of these calls look like? That's very broad, but
yeah, very broad. You know, I would say the most traumatic, not traumatic, how do you put that? The most graphic for me personally are car accidents. And I didn't go to them as working for a private company. I went to them as a volunteer. So you're not getting paid. You're just kind of, you're going on these calls to learn. And I did that for 2 years, or yeah, close to 2 years. And it was awesome. It was a great experience. But as far as those car crashes, it's like for one, there can be multiple patients. That's like the first thing. You know, when you go to something that's like an overdose or a suicide attempt or whatever, you know, a single or a heart attack, it's one person. You're there for one person, and you have this patient, and you're trying to do everything you can. But in a car crash, it becomes a matter of you have to assess and triage these people and decide who is the most critical. And not that was thrown on me a lot, you know. I as an EMT, especially early on, it really, you know, I didn't have a voice. I was a helper. Yeah. And for good reason, you know, that's kind of just the system of how it works. But as far as being a paramedic and what calls would bother me the most, car crashes, because you have to make decisions. You have to decide, you know, it's like I have 3 people in here, and I have to decide which one of them is the most critical. Who needs transport? I only have 1 ambulance and I have 3 patients. Oof. Who gets to go? Who is the most likely, 1, to die immediately if we don't help them, or 2, that they are already gone and that we should try and they're going to die and we should try and help someone else. And those are like, you know, the weight of those decisions, man, is just, and, you know, and having multiple patients, and then the chaos of that, and then, you know, people have their kids in the back of their car or whatever it is, you know, and it's 2 cars usually. So the chaos of those scenes grows exponentially. And then people they know were driving behind them, or, you know what I mean? And you have family trying to follow you in the ambulance. And it's just, there's a lot that goes in there. And not that that doesn't happen on regular calls, but as far as car accidents, it's the most, I would say, dense chaos.
Yeah, so I know people like prison guards and stuff have to rotate out. Do you think that'd be a good thing to happen for EMTs and paramedics?
Actually, I'm not familiar with the practice. So they rotate out as far as like you work for a few months and then you don't.
Yeah, because I imagine coming home after a day of seeing 1 or maybe even 2 car accidents would be,
you know,
very hard.
And it's weird. It's I guess that's kind of, you know, where I don't feel like that. Like it's not like if I go on a few bad calls that I come home and I'm like, throw all my stuff down and, you know, curl up in a ball on the couch. I go about my day as I would whether I went on a bad call or not. And that, like, I think that's kind of part of the mindset that you're, whatever that call is and whatever happened, you're there to make a difference and try and help these people, and you do the best that you can, and that's all you can do. And that's kind of like, you have to keep that in mind, and you can't, you know, because if you live emotionally through every call that you go on, you're not going to last very long. It's going to, you know, it's going to eat you up in no time flat, you know. It's, how do I say that? Trying to think.
You'll get it.
that you can't live inside of that. Yeah. You can't, that's not a land to live in, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Mm-hmm. You know, to be in that place of like, man, all this like death and destruction that I'm seeing all the time, and you're just like like that's how people spiral, I think. That's, you know, in my mind, when I see people that I know that have gone down that road a ways, that's kind of what they did, was they kind of, you know, internalized it a lot. And I don't think that's not the way to go about it, because it's not your emergency. That's one of my captains. He's really big on that. He's like, it's not your emergency, man. Like, don't crash trying to race there because it's a code. Don't, you know, destroy equipment because you're in a hurry. Don't, you know, it's not your emergency. Slow down, calm down, do what you need to do. And at the end of the day, then, you know, you've done what you can.
So how has it shifted your perception of death? Because the ordinary person never sees it. It's, you know, as soon as it happens, it's swept out of your sight. Yeah. But someone like you is right in it.
Yeah. You know, it's I guess I kind of go back a little bit back and forth with it. You know, I'm someone that kind of like, I considered going farther in medicine than paramedic. I don't know whether that would have been nurse or doctor, but no, I'm fairly set in my ways. But I have a little bit of a morbid curiosity, and that's not something that innately bothers me a whole lot. So I feel like I kind of have a little bit of a leg up on other people that have to deal with that on an emotional level, because I really don't particularly, you know. I mean, and lots of stuff that we see is sad and terrible, and, you know, and I'm not blind to that, and I feel for those people, but it's not, there's a kind of a compartmentalizing thing that goes on there where you can't, like, you can't live inside of that, I guess, if that makes any sense. So where do you live then? I live in my life, you know. That's kind of like, and I love my job and I love my career, and I'm trying to push farther with it. But at the end of the day, I want to like enjoy my life outside of EMS, and I don't want it to consume me, you know. And like to have, you know, that's kind of my markers for if I'm doing well. You know, I can be advancing in my career, but the most important thing to me is that I have good relationships with my family and friends, you know, and a good relationship with yourself, really, you know, and like how you have decided you want to present and act in the world. That's kind of where my like focus and energy lies. Because if my focus and energy was in, you know, feeling bad about calls I'd been on, or, you know, hyper focusing on negative things that have happened in my life or in other people's, that I wouldn't be a happy person. You know, and that, like, I think that's kind of part of what EMS has done for me, is that it's forced me to be very realistic about what matters to me and what's important. Because when you see people like my age, I've seen lots of people that have died drinking and driving or overdosed, or, you know, and it always kind of just makes me more grateful, and it makes me kind of cling on to the things that I care about harder, because it's, you know, it's so uncertain, definitely life is uncertain. And then doing this job kind of, it's thrown in your face every day. But it's easy to like, I think it's easier for people to hyper focus on that, and you can't. And it's kind of, you have a skewed perspective because it's like cops. It's like, like I would never want to be a cop personally. And they do a very, very like tough, difficult job, thankless job. And I would never want to do it. I would never want to be a cop, but I've been around them a lot. And and like, that was one thing that changed as far as from being a young man and having this like kind of idealistic idea that, you have to like fight this, fight the power and all that sort of stuff. Then for going from that to becoming an EMT and getting to work and interact with police on a daily basis, night and day difference of how I perceive them. And I kind of lost, somewhere in there.
I mean, we're just going everywhere.
Yeah, we're just going everywhere. That's my conversation style, though.
Yeah, I like it. The whole idea of PTSD and traumatic experience. A guest that I'm gonna have this Friday, so I'll probably be out like Monday or something, is someone who works with kids who have experienced trauma and working through it with play and sport.
Man.
So and then speaking to Zach Wolf last week. He said just having conversations with close friends kind of helped him get through. And
I mean, one like a big thing in the department that I was volunteering for is family support. That like you can't do that, especially volunteer, because those people, man, and there's a lot to be said for career people that work very hard, but there's a lot of volunteers out there who they work a full-time job, probably plus, take care of their family, and then get up in the middle of the night and go to calls without pay. So there's like, how do you say that?
I'll cut you off.
Yeah,
do you ever almost feel unfulfilled, or do you ever get stuck in a glue trap, even though you are doing work that saves lives?
Yes.
And helps people?
Yes, 100%. Yes. And I think that's kind of, it's more personal than it is professional, that I need to keep things moving forward in my personal life as well as my professional life, kind of to feel okay. And that's kind of like, it's like you get, I would say for me, it's getting stuck in a routine.
Yeah.
It's when I feel like things are, which is kind of funny to say, working in EMS, but not all of EMS is as glamorous as, it's not all, holding arteries and
I wouldn't call it glamorous.
No. Well, it's not like action-packed heroism all the time. I would say the percentage is about 93% of calls are semi-serious to not serious at all.
Like what? What would one of those look like?
Toe pain. I've been to calls for toe pain.
Okay.
Yeah, they're like, my foot aches.
And they spend $4,000 to get an ambulance ride.
Oh no, and they'll be like, oh, I have, what's it called? The insurance to ride an ambulance. I should know.
Oh yeah, where it's $20 a year.
Yeah.
That is cool. I'm curious.
But see, and then that's a little bit shaky because they only cover it if it's a necessary transport.
Oh, that is sketchy.
So, but yeah, toe pain. I'm trying to think of some of the other, and then we have people too they're kind of repeat offenders, or we call them frequent flyers, and they have health problems, legitimate health problems, whatever it might be, but they kind of call the ambulance at the drop of a hat, and we can't say no to transporting them. There's no, there's kind of some interesting law around people being in ambulances as far as their rights and our rights, but we can't say no to them. If you call an ambulance and you say, I'd like to be taken to the hospital by ambulance, whether we think you're full of BS or not, we have to take you. So these people are, I'll see them 3 times a week, 4 times a week. And they're like, I'm having trouble breathing. And it's like, well, your SATs are the same and you have COPD and you smoke and you're on oxygen all the time. I'm guessing you're going to have some problems breathing sometimes, and so that's kind of, but where do you draw the line there? Because people with respiratory illnesses, it's like they can go from I'm having some trouble breathing to unconscious, and not very long. So it's
a rough line.
There's no easy line to draw there, I would say.
Yeah. And have you ever been on the other side of a call? Have you ever had to call an ambulance?
I have not. Wait, actually, when I was in, I would say early high school, I was at the skate park and a friend actually shot him out. Gator Green, probably, had a pretty bad bike crash in the skate park. And me and another person, a few other people, were kind of the only people there to, try to render first aid. We didn't know what to do and called an ambulance. And that was the first time I'd ever seen anyone, in an ambulance or I'd never even really thought about that. And I think it kind of stuck in my mind just a little bit as an experience. And then kind of later on because originally I started out trying to be a scuba diver. Okay. And I failed out of scuba diving fairly quickly because I wasn't very good at it, one. And two, the people that I was in class with were light years ahead of me as far as experience. And so it kind of, turned me off to it. And I think I was still fairly immature at the time. And I didn't kind of understand the concept of hard work, really. Mm-hmm. And then I didn't really know what to do. I failed out of that. And I took an EMT class. And kind of from the very beginning, I wanted it pretty bad. And then once I started ride-alongs and like seeing calls, then I was like completely hooked. It was like a switch had gone off, and I was like, this is what I'm doing forever. I'm never, whatever I have to do to be the top echelon of this is what I'm gonna strive for. And it kind of hasn't really ever let up. I haven't really faltered, and that's what I want to do.
Is being a paramedic the top echelon of that? What's the difference?
So we could talk about the difference. We've been, diving into all these issues. So there's a few levels, and the levels vary between states. So like different state licenses for different levels of certification don't mean the same thing in the same place or different places. But as far as Oregon, it would be EMR, which is an emergency medical responder, which is basically like if you're taking vitals, you can do like CPR. That it's very like basic, and I think they can do blood sugar as well. And then you go up to EMT, which is like the one above that, and it's more like you're there to I think EMT is kind of you can run calls on your own, but really you're there to assist a paramedic. Like EMTs know enough that the medic can do their thing without having to like look and reach and, like deal with things, mm-hmm. that they can focus on patient care. And that's kind of the other, the people may not know how that works, that when you go on a call, say there's 4 of us, one person's leading that call, the most senior person, and everyone else is just that person's assistant. Kind of, and obviously we'll interject and say something if something's going wrong, but really it's very chain of command oriented. Nice. So that when you go in, the whoever's leading the call, usually a paramedic, will say, "This is what I want done. You do this," and they delegate those tasks.
If they make a call that you completely oppose, do you call them out on it? But in the moment, that just raises stress levels.
And that's the other, and it's very, very complex because. Yes, you do. The literature is pretty clear that you say if they're doing something and you really think it's a mistake, you should say something. But on the other hand, there's the side of there's a lot of image involved. Egos? And just image as far as our image as first responders. That if I'm, helping one of your family members and then all of a sudden someone's questioning the person that's running the call, that it looks really bad. Like it makes us look like a joke, really. You know what I mean? And that's kind of the harshest level of I've had it explained to me that you don't do that. You don't question people, kind of. So there's a line there. But if you truly believe it, man, if there was something that was happening that I was like, you're going to kill this person giving this to them, I would say something.
Okay.
But there's a line, and that's kind of the whole thing with EMS is there's never any.
What's EMS? You said EMR, EMT, and then EMS, but you didn't name
EMS is emergency medical services. That's the whole. Everybody falls under that category is EMS.
Nice. And so once you become a paramedic, you'll be the person making the calls. Everyone else is handling.
Yeah, and there's kind of levels above that. There's critical care paramedics. There's flight medics. But paramedic is like the highest you can get in the field, unless you're like a medical director.
If you get called on a family member, say it was your mother or father, mm-hmm. Do you send off control to the person, the EMT below you, or what do you?
Well, and so that's very like, so usually people that I know that's happened to, or a family member,
because you don't have time to call a new paramedic.
That's not, that wouldn't happen. You'd run the call. and that kind of happens, especially with small towns and rural departments that, you know, usually either all or mostly, I'd say above 80% are volunteer run, or, you know, and there might be some paid people, but probably it would be like a chief, assistant chief, and maybe a captain or two.
When you say that, we're going to go off on a little tangent here. When you say that, but it costs thousands of dollars to take an ambulance.
These people, okay, that's
a whole nother thing.
No, we should cover it because it's really important. I feel like I've spiraled out on so many topics that we haven't like laid down a baseline very well.
We'll come back to if you're a family member.
Yeah, so when a fire department, say you're in a town around here, a rural town, and you have an emergency and you call 911, that call is going to get dispatched to the local fire department first. And if that fire department transports, which I would say any rural department usually doesn't, at least around here, then there's going to be first responders from that fire department who are usually volunteer, who are going to come first. After that, they're going to dispatch at the same time, but if you're in a rural community, they're going to send an ambulance out, whoever that might be, whether it's private or public. And that's where the cost is going to come from, is from that ambulance transport. So when it's like when you live in a city and you pay city taxes, especially in rural communities, you're paying for your fire department. So when they come and they put your house fire out, or they come do CPR on someone, no one gets charged.
Yeah.
That's like free, completely, you know, benefits of living in that district. But then when you talk about transport, that's where it gets dicey. And that's kind of where all the cost comes from.
A private company owns the ambulance and leases it out, is my understanding?
And that's very, very, like, it's hugely dependent on where you are. So you take Eugene, for example. Eugene transports, and not only do they do transport, they have ALS and BLS, which would be advanced life support and basic life support. And so the way that they run their system is they have 2 paramedics on their ALS ambulances, and they run ALS calls, and then they have 2 EMTs.
Each call has 2 heads.
Yes, each call. Well, and kind of, I would say they take turns leading, you know, that there's still those roles.
Yeah.
But they have, like, you know, if you're having a heart attack, an ALS ambulance is going to show up with 2 paramedics. Okay. And if you have what the dispatcher deems to be like a basic life support emergency, that's not like, it's probably not the right way to say it, but yeah, exactly. Something that's non-emergent, they'll send their BLS crew.
Have one person.
No, they'll send their BLS crew. Oh. So that would be 2 EMTs.
Okay.
So so if there's an advanced call, then they send their 2 medics. If there's a basic call, they send their 2 EMTs.
Okay, cool.
Which is kind of, you know, it's not everybody runs it that way, but that's just an example.
Shit.
Yeah, and that's how, and they pay for the department like that too. They charge for transport. Yeah. Eugene does.
Okay. And do you think paramedics and EMTs are adequately compensated for the trauma they go through in their time?
You know, I mean, is anyone paid adequately for their job? You know, I mean, and there's lots of people that you could argue aren't. You know, it depends on where you are and where you work, who you're working for. And I think that kind of, you know, with any profession, that your choices as far as where you go and what you do exactly are kind of determinant of your pay. But you know, but I give all that being said, overall probably not. Yeah. But I just don't. I'm not in a position to make that judgment call, and I couldn't give you a number of what they should be paid, or what, you know what I mean. It's just kind of.
If you were to tomorrow be the head of all EMS, what are some changes you'd make to better everyone's morale? And
you know, I mean, and really, I would say that would probably be, you could do that as far as, you know, like paid sick time. You know, there's been a lot of changes, and I think that people are really starting to like take mental health seriously and the PTSD seriously, and, you know, something like, it's like first responders are twice as likely to have a psychological disorder related to post-traumatic stress. It's like 50% higher than the regular population. And so I think that like having focus on that would be good. But I really don't know how to do that. I don't have some genius plan to implement, you know. It's a very complex thing, and people are very closed, and there's a huge culture around kind of the old ways of, you know, just deal with it, and, you know, this is the job that you do, man. Like,
there's a good quote I heard that's tradition's just dead people peer pressuring you, and I like that, because it's like things should change. We have new information today. Like, like we kind of brought it up earlier, but if you did experience PTSD, could you go to therapy for free?
No.
Is it not covered?
No.
So that would be a good change.
I don't think so. I think that you can get on a health plan through your, and that's another thing too, is for a lot of people, I think that they wouldn't seek help because it might affect them in future employment. And obviously that's, and you couldn't talk openly about it. And, if you took time off, then either you're telling them that you're having a mental health crisis, or you're lying about why you're taking time off. Mm-hmm. So I think there's that's the whole thing about stigma. It's not, you can't change it with rules.
Yeah.
That's kind of, and I feel like that's kind of a lot of the.
Well, if the rule is everyone mandatory has to go to 1 hour therapy a month or a week.
Yeah.
I think that would change.
But then people, then you're going to have that pushback of making people do stuff, I just it's a hard thing to implement. And there are a lot of people that are very old school. But also there's this new generation that's up and coming. But I think that less people are trying to be medics than have been in the past, and that there is a shortage. And that part of it is that nursing is fairly similar.
But easier on the psyche and
I wouldn't say easier on the psyche. I would say equally as hard, if not harder.
Wow. And why would you say that?
But because nurses, so like a paramedic, you're going to deal with this person, you're going to get them, and you're going to get them to the hospital. Mm-hmm. And whatever happens between, that's your work. Mm-hmm. But as far as nurses go, it's like you can't, the nurse can't drop that patient off to someone else. Okay. They can't, there's no walking away from that. You can't, you got to handle it. You got to handle it. You got to see it through. And not that that's any different. I would say, you're comparing apples and oranges a little bit there, if you're trying to make that distinction. But as far as traumatic experience in the workplace, but nurses go through it just as much as paramedics do. Yeah. I would argue that with just about any. I mean, and depending on the field where they're at, but if you're going to say a nurse in the ED, in the emergency department, mm-hmm. they're going to see just as much, if not more and worse than what we see, because they get to see it all the way through.
I'm curious. So let's take me through an entire thing. You got on call of someone who tried to commit suicide. They're ODing, but they're still alive. You get there and they're like, I regret it. Please save my life. What do you do? And they're ODing on, let's say, fentanyl.
See, okay, so if they're ODing, they're not going to be talking to you.
Okay, you know what I mean, though. They clearly want to survive.
We save your life whether you want to survive or not. It's kind of like but I would say, okay, so as when we walk in, the first thing we're going to look for, you're doing what's called a first impression. There's kind of like a checklist. So when you walk into a call, there's things, and the first one's scene safety. So you're like, is the scene safe? Am I safe to be here? Am I gonna, get poisoned?
Do you break in the door to get in there and start doing that?
No. So police do our safety stuff.
Okay.
They clear a scene. So if for some reason they think it might be unsafe, police clear the scene and they say, okay, we're clear for EMS to move in.
Okay, cool. And then you go in.
And then we go in, and so you're doing the way they do it in school is they kind of make you list it out. Mm-hmm. So it's like BSI, which is body substance isolation, and scene safety are the two most important. That's your first one. When you test, you're like, is my scene safe? And
so you're using high terminology that a lot of people here won't know. So I'd almost say use more layman's terms if you can.
So the first thing is scene safety, and then body substance isolation, mm-hmm. which is part of scene safety, which is I'm wearing my gloves. If it's, this person's bleeding, I'm going to wear goggles. I'm going to, protect myself from contamination as much as is practically possible.
Yeah.
And then when you walk in, you're getting your first impression. And you can get that, sitting across the table from you, I could be like, okay, his skin looks the right color. It's not purple. It's not super clammy. It's not pale. You're not struggling to breathe. You're holding eye contact with me. You're doing, movements with your hands. You're not lopsided. There's an infinite number of things I could spill out. Mm-hmm. But when you walk in and you look at someone, you're trying to...
And this is all in a split second.
A split second, yeah. By the time you walk across into the room, before you introduce yourself, you should already have at least that basic... and we do it by ABCs, which is airway, breathing, circulation. So that's what you're looking for. That first initial thing is their airway open? Is it patent? Can they move air? Mm-hmm. And if it's not, then you fix that. or you try to,
like
the best
a hole
that you
there
can.
or something along those lines.
Usually an airway device.
Okay.
Depending,
and what's
because
that?
it's like they call them OPAs, an oral pharyngeal or airway.
I don't care what it is. Just go on. But what is it like? Does it go down their throat?
Yeah, well, so it looks kind of like this. It's like it looks like a backwards tongue, kind of.
Okay.
And it goes in, and it doesn't actually go all the way down your throat, and it has a stopper at the end. So it kind of sits. It sits like this.
Podcast people might not know. It sits kind of in your mouth.
Yeah, it sits in your mouth.
You're being French kissed by a robot.
Yeah, by a plastic piece.
Okay.
And what it does is it just holds your tongue from occluding your airway. Because a lot of the times when people are unconscious and they're really unconscious, not just asleep, but unconscious, they won't be managing their own airway. They'll be kind of hunched over or occluding it in some way. So your first priority is open their airway. And then from there you go, are they breathing? You know, and the things you want to know is
if they're not.
And if if they're breathing, and if they're not, then you breathe for them. That's kind of
with your mouth. I mean, sure.
No,
EMTs
we have bags. So like a BVM is a bag valve mask, and it's just a mask that you hold over someone's face and you squeeze it. You know, every 5 to 6 seconds.
Yeah.
Moving air for them, and with breathing, you know, say they are breathing, you want to know rate, rhythm, and quality. So, you know, how fast are they breathing? What?
So breath is more important than circulation?
Yeah.
Because I always heard when you're resuscitating someone, pressing the heart is more important than giving them air.
But cardiac arrest is kind of it's its own monster.
Okay.
You know, kind of like all codes, kind of not all, but most codes get ran basically the same. You know, the same drugs get used, the same compression. You know, it's a very standardized procedure, kind of, and for good reason. But as far as assessment goes, it's kind of like it's an easy assessment. If you walk in and someone's in cardiac arrest, you're gonna know.
You put the plastic thing in their mouth, and then you get them breathing with the bag, and then what would you do for circulation?
So I would say the first part of that whole. We're kind of jumping ahead a little bit. That assessment part is you're gonna know, like, within, say it was a cardiac arrest, you're gonna know when you walk in, or you're gonna know beforehand because you got called to this call that is a cardiac arrest. So you have a game plan set up already. But when you get there and they're like, this person's unwell and we don't know what's going on, or their altered mental status, like they're not making sense now when they were an hour ago. Or
have you ever been called in on someone experiencing psychosis?
Yeah, I've done a few psychosis calls.
And did you have cops with you, or did you have to?
No, we had cops. Well, actually, the one that a few stick out in my mind, but both of them were at a police station.
Oh, where?
The person was already at the police station.
They went to the police station?
Well, one of them, the guy showed up at the police station and was in some sort of drug psychosis, and was concerned about his mom or so. I can't remember what exactly had happened, but he ended up getting transported, and then mid-transport he jumped out of he got loose, jumped out of the ambulance, was in a subsequent chase with the police, you know, on foot. They ended up capturing him again, and they ended up chemically sedating him and bringing him to the hospital. But it was very, you know, you could tell, and I wasn't there for the second part of that call. I was only there for the first part where he willingly went. But you could see that he was completely disconnected from reality.
They're in a different world.
Oh, well, and I think that, like, enough in our world that he was dangerous.
Yeah. If you experience someone on psychosis, do you have to wait until they become dangerous to sedate them, or could you say this person's experiencing psychosis?
Usually, if people are cooperative and
but it can switch on a dime.
Yes, it can. It totally can. And usually, you know, and that's kind of like it's case by case, and you really have to feel it out. You know, and keep your safety in mind. And if and it's like the cops don't mind if we're like, hey, would one of you guys mind riding back here with us? Especially when it's like, you know, a female paramedic that's 100 pounds and you're dealing with someone who's very high on drugs and like 250 and 6'3", like you're going to want that cop back there.
Yeah.
But most of the time, you know, I've never been assaulted by a patient.
Okay.
I've never had anyone attack me or anything like that.
Do you fight back if they do? What would happen?
I try to avoid and evade.
Just run away.
Yeah, because it would be and that's kind of part of it is like, for me to do anything other than that would be a disservice to the people that have come before me doing this job. Because that's a big part of it is public trust.
Yeah.
You know, that that people trust you to walk into their house and help them when they're, you know, having an emergency.
Their time of need.
And that's like huge trust. And so, you know, as far as personally and as a department and whatever entity you're a part of, that's like one of the biggest things is your public image, because you know the public needs to trust you, and that's like, and anything that compromises that is not okay.
Yeah.
And it doesn't just reflect badly on that person that does it. It reflects badly on everyone. It's kind of like cops, you know. I mean, it's very similar, but
yeah, it's a lot of image here. I'm curious. So if you go in and say a young boy got into something that he shouldn't have, and he's ODing, and the mother's there too, would you're not allowed to let her ride in the ambulance with him, are you?
Yeah, you can.
You can?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, I must have misheard.
You know, and it's very like, the paramedic that's running the call is going to make all those decisions, and it can go either way.
Okay.
But most of the time, they're very like kind, understanding, intelligent people, and they're going to do the things that are best for that situation.
Will they allow someone to stay with them the entire time through the ER and everything? Because
it depends
being separated from a couple people you trust can be the most detrimental thing in a serious situation like that.
You know, it depends. Like, you know, again, it's very specific. That's kind of healthcare, you know, like you might have a different charge nurse from one day to the next.
Yeah.
But usually they're very, very good about letting family back as long as they're not going to get in the way. And usually when they are keeping family back, it's because they need to work on this person, and they can't have anyone distracting, and you know what I mean? Like it has to be its own thing. And for the most part, if that's not the case, then they will let people back. It's in my experience. But if you're acting erratic, if you're, you know, showing in some way that you're going to be detrimental to this person's care, then we're going to tell you no.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where were we? We were back to
we've just jumped
their airway
all over,
and then you got them breathing.
Okay. Well, yeah. So you're gonna look at their airway. You're gonna look at their breathing, and then you're gonna look at their circulation. And inside of those things, like inside airway, breathing, and circulation, are your vitals. So in that kind of like clustered in there, and in the book, you know, they're separate steps.
Yeah.
It goes, you know, ABCs and then vitals. But I would say that most people, it's like those are tied together. That like is one big clump of information.
Yeah, you almost black out and get that shit
done.
Yeah,
and that's what you're trying, because you're trying to establish where you're at. You know, you want to, you know, temperature, a blood pressure, a pulse oximeter, which is like how much oxygen is in your blood. So it's like a ultraviolet, or not ultraviolet, like a laser. It's like a red light, and it measures how many oxygen hemoglobins are in your blood cells by percentage. And so you should be at 90. You know, us right now, we're at between 96 and 100 right now. But you know, if you put that on, you're like, okay, this person needs oxygen.
80.
Yeah, 80's low.
Then what
80's,
do you do?
And like about, I would say, between, you know, 70 and 60 is unconsciousness.
Okay.
Depending on the person.
Could you save someone if they're down at 20, or is that pretty much done for?
At that point, they're gonna have brain damage.
Okay.
You know, I would say. Well, and that's it's kind of different with codes. So when you work a code, you're putting in an airway device, like you're intubating. Usually, you know, if it's a paramedic, they're going to intubate that person, which is, you know, thread a tube between their vocal cords and occlude their airway so that you can breathe through them through this tube.
Yeah.
And in that tube, there's a device that measures CO2 output. And so that's what that's one baseline that people really use to judge cardiac arrest.
Okay.
So is your body having cellular respiration and letting off CO2?
Okay. So
because if we're putting in oxygen and no CO2 is coming out, then your blood's not. There's no cellular respiration happening. Yeah. There could be circulation, but there's no cellular respiration.
Okay. And so what is it? What
cellular respiration would be the exchange of oxygen between your blood cells and tissues.
Yeah, but what would it mean if that's not happening?
Any number of things.
Okay.
You know, it's like, and that's kind of, you know, and that's sort of not our job. Our job isn't really to diagnose. It's to treat. You know, we don't know what's wrong with you.
To treat, almost.
You don't, though.
Really?
No. So, like, you know, let's take a drug overdose.
Okay.
They're like, this person took a bunch of drugs. We don't know what they took. And we get there and they're agonally breathing, which is where someone's breathing. It's kind of like death. I would call it death breathing. It's where you're not, your body, it's uneven, labored unsteady breaths that are not, they don't have a rhyme or reason, and they kind of come with periods of apnea, which is lack of breathing. So we'd walk in, and it doesn't matter what drug that person took. It doesn't matter, you know, at that point in time. Yeah. We're going to manage their airway. We're going to get their airway secured. We're going to start bagging them. We're going to get a rhythm on them. We're going to get a blood pressure, you know, blood glucose. Because you kind of, and because you can't jump to conclusions. You have to have all that information. You can't walk in and say, oh, this person's obviously a drug overdose. I'm going to, you know, give them Narcan. Yeah. You know, you really, like, if you got called for an overdose, yeah, you're going to hit them with Narcan. But it's all situational, you know. It's very, you gotta be very flexible in how you're, you know, you can't walk in there with some predetermined idea. And I've kind of seen it happen before with people where they go to a call and they already have it in their mind what this call is going to be. Yeah. And they kind of tunnel vision to that, whatever.
Have you seen someone die because of a missed call on the lead's part?
No, okay. I've never seen that. Okay. I've never even seen it come close. Okay. You know, that the system of backup there and the level at which a lot of, you know, the people in this field operate at is just like, it's incredible, man. Yeah. You know, a lot of the people I've had as mentors are just like, they are some of the most put together and centered people I've ever met. They stay calm kind of, you know, no matter what. And that it's very like clear-headed, decisive, calm, even thinking. Yeah. And that's when and if you know the material, you're not going to make any mistakes, you know? It's just not going to happen. But there is human error. And I think part of that is being honest, you know? And I think part of it is that mistakes do happen, but it should never be because of negligence. Yeah. You know, the mistakes will be made. It's human error. Things happen. But our goal is for none of those mistakes to be because someone didn't do their part.
What does accountability look like for people in EMS? Like if you gave them Narcan when they've OD'd on maybe cocaine or something instead of opiates, and they die because of negligence.
Well, and so you can't.
Or I don't know.
You don't know. Okay, so. Like, so everything. So every medication that we have, you know, whatever level you're operating at, it has indications and counterindications. So let's say, give like just a scenario. Let's say you're like a 85-year-old guy, and you're having chest pain, and you've had 2 heart attacks in the past and a bypass. Yeah. And so like at that point, and you're like, hey, I'm prescribed nitroglycerin. It's a vasodilator. Okay. To help relieve, you know, and relieve pressure on the inside of your heart or whatever. Yeah. And I just give it to you. I'm like, hey, this person's prescribed this.
How do you know they're prescribed?
Because they'd have the bottle of medication. It would say their name on it.
Okay.
You know, so like.
No, but wouldn't that be like in their bathroom? Like how do you?
Because that's one thing we do when we walk in. We grab their medications.
Oh, really?
So like, it kind of becomes sort of detective work a little bit, where it's like, you know, we don't know exactly what's wrong with this person. We're gonna use every available resource we have to figure out to the best of our abilities what's going on, which would be, you know, looking at their medications, looking at their medical paperwork, looking at whatever, you know, sort of maybe medical stuff they have in their fridge, a wristband, whatever that might be. But here, let's go back to this scenario. Yeah. So you're this 85-year-old guy, you know, and you're prescribed.
Oh, my left arm.
Yeah, my left arm.
Yeah. And burnt toast.
And so you're prescribed this medication that's for cardiac events, and I just give it to you. You could die, because like there are counterindications to giving this medication, and one of those counterindications is systolic blood pressure of more than 100. So like, or sorry, yeah, systolic. So your systolic blood pressure isn't above 100, and I give you this medication. It's going to vasodilate you. It's going to make all your veins open.
Way too
no,
much.
It's not going to slow down.
Really?
It's going to like, so imagine your body has like pipes in it, pipes with water.
Yeah. And
so imagine there's the same amount of water, but the pipes get really big.
Isn't that what you'd want if you're having a heart attack because of plaque around your
arteries?
Yes,
and you do want that. You want that vasodilation, but if there's not, like, so like, let's say the water or the pipes won't work if they're not full. If they're not full of water, they're not going to work, or they're not going to function properly.
But there's no air in your arteries and veins, so what else would it be full of?
No, it's not full of anything.
So that's just the point. The pressure dumps.
Yeah, the pressure goes down.
Oh, okay.
So you know, and so it's going to drop your blood pressure significantly, which is usually a good thing. Usually people that are having cardiac events, I mean, not usually, I would say, sorry, I shouldn't even be using generalized terms. Some people that have cardiac events benefit from that medication because their blood pressure is already high, and this is going to bring it down, and it's going to relieve some of the stress on their heart. And, it's going to make things more manageable as far as getting them to the hospital and relieving their symptoms in the meantime. But if you give it when it's counterindicated, you could drop that person's blood pressure so low that it could kill them or send them into cardiac arrest or, whatever emergency you can think of.
Yeah.
So.
And you've never witnessed that?
No, I've never witnessed that, because if I'm going to give you that medication, the first thing that I'm going to do is make sure I'm going to check all my boxes along that line. One is, are you qualified to take this medication? Do you fit all the parameters that say give this person this drug? And two, do you have no counterindications? And another actually counterindication of that medication would be sexual enhancement drugs, like Viagra. Yeah. If you're taking Viagra and I gave you that medication, it could kill you.
Wasn't Viagra initially for heart
and what it does, it helps you vasodilate. I really don't know the super specifics of how it works, but yeah, exactly.
No, but anyways,
we can edit that. Yeah, out.
So they're already on Viagra, and you give them more. It's just
it's not necessarily Viagra. Viagra just makes it easier to vasodilate. Yeah, because that's what getting an erection would be.
So say that worst case scenario happens, and I'm an 80-year-old who just died. Do you still bring me back to the hospital, or where do you bring me?
Well, so that. Let's say I give you, we're going really deep into this scenario that makes me deeply uncomfortable because I wouldn't want it to happen. But
sorry.
No, that's the goal. That's the goal here. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No,
I mean, I know a perfect one goes well. You go there and you assess everything perfectly,
and then you treat them right, and you get them to the hospital.
So we're not going with those.
So let's say
scenarios.
You're this 85-year-old guy, and I give you this medication, and it's for you. Like it should work, and you go unconscious and cardiac arrest right there.
Yep.
We're going to start running that code. We're going to do compressions on you. We're going to get your airway secured.
You keep saying code. Do you have all these memorized? You don't have a book with you?
No.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, a code is just a cardiac arrest. It's short for a cardiac arrest.
Okay.
So your heart stops. You just
you're done.
Go limp.
You're now in the room with a dead person.
Yeah. So you're going to start compressions on that person. You're going to manage their airway depending on what level you're at, So like an EMT, that's what an EMT would do. An EMT is going to get an airway going, get an oral airway.
Yep.
They're going to bag that person. They're going to do compressions on that person.
What's the paramedic doing while the EMT's
No, so say there's only EMTs.
Oh, okay.
There's only EMTs there.
Yep.
That's what they're going to do. They're going to run that code it's at a very basic level. It's EMT basic.
Unless they have a DNR.
Then you're not going to do anything. You're going to follow the instructions of their DNR.
Have you ever had to experience that?
Yeah. Oh yeah. We've done a lot, and I've had one where the person, I was actually running the call. I was running the code. I had someone else that was a captain that was on their way, but it was me and 3 other people that were of the same level, and I ended up being in charge. And they had a DNR. It wasn't signed by a doctor.
But
it was partially filled out and it wasn't signed.
But the patient didn't want to be resuscitated.
Yes, but that is
so and see no, but that
we ran that code, and then one of my captains got there and said, "Hey, what do you have?" And we were getting asystole. We were running a code, but we weren't. She'd been gone for a while, it presumably, but not long enough that we could tell the difference.
Yeah.
And he talked to the family and then made the judgment call himself that we were going to call the code.
Because it almost brings up an interesting point of what is the goal of life? Is it to squeeze out as much time as you can?
And that's kind of, and that's where I think other people in healthcare have to struggle with that a little bit more than we do, but we still see it on a day-to-day, but.
So how has that affected the way so say you have a parent pass, which will happen to all of us.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Do you view death differently than you did 5 years ago before you got into this?
100%. And I couldn't really, that's hard to articulate. I think
it seems more natural.
Yeah. I think that it's a reality that I have accepted more as I've gotten older, but also have done this career. That it kind of, I've gotten a lot more comfortable with it, and not that those things aren't, those are some of the hardest struggles anyone has in their life is losing their parents or losing a loved one or, but I don't think that it's made it harder on me, You know, I think I have like a different perspective than I would have had if I had not done it. But not a more negative one, I would say. And not a more like, it's not more doom and gloom. It's more...
Well, it's hard to get more negative than the way that society already kind of treats death. By first off, forcing no one to ever look at it or see at it, and then it's fearmonger does.
Yeah. And I mean, but and also, you know, I would say at the root of it, it's a scary thing. You know, dying is a fairly upsetting proposition.
No, absolutely. But it's going to happen to every single one of us. Yes. That's one of the only things that's guaranteed.
Yeah, death and taxes, man.
Yeah.
Death and taxes.
Unless you never work. So pretty much just death.
Yeah, pretty much
You're guaranteed to die, and yet everyone's afraid of it, which is an interesting thing. And you deal with it on the daily.
A lot. Yeah, I mean, and a lot is kind of that's a relative term.
A lot more than the average person.
But a lot more than the average person, yes. You know, I guess I would say into a kind of, not like a blasé attitude, but I would say I'm a little bit less serious about it than a lot of people are. And that's a big part, I would say, another thing, as far as at the beginning, you know, we've gotten off on a lot of topics, but I was trying to, you know, speak to that one person out there that's like, I want to become an EMT or a paramedic, and I'm not sure that I could deal with that. You know, to that person, it doesn't make life harder. I would say, you know, if you handle it right and you do this and you truly believe in what you're doing and you enjoy it,
I don't think you can make that blanket statement. There's some people who are not good with processing trauma. That's a fact. I think if you've experienced,
I would say, but overall benefit, you know, like I wouldn't say I'm immune from trauma. I wouldn't go out there and be like, I have no issues because of doing this, but I have a very like good support system, and I have a good way of managing.
What's your support system? Is it friends and family?
Friends and family.
Is there a community around the EMS?
Yeah. I mean, and that's very like, as far as your department, like where you're doing it, that's kind of that's your community, and those are the people that go on those calls with you. So those are the people that understand, and those are the people that can relate to you, and and be there for you on that level.
Best friends?
Oh, totally. I mean, and it's kind of a different kind of closeness. It's not like I talk to them every week.
Yeah.
It's more like if I needed them, I know they would be there. Yeah. Or if one of them needed me.
Like someone? Have you ever experienced it where you just there's someone on your team that you just know is just...
Oh, totally. And you know the funniest part about that actually is that it happened a lot more at the beginning when I was first starting. And then I came to realize that it wasn't that I was that people were better, you know, like later on. It was that I was kind of an asshole and that I didn't, you know, that I wasn't like
giving people breaks.
Yeah. Well, or no, not giving people breaks. That like breaks. I would say, yeah. Well, when I first started doing it, like when I first got my EMT, it was the highest level of like, I guess, narcissism I've ever had about it. Okay. That I was like, oh, I fucking save lives now. Mr. Billy Badass kind of thing.
How old were you when that happened?
I was 23.
Okay.
I was 23 when I became
EMT. And now you're
EMT.
25?
6.
Okay,
9,
cool.
6.
What is time?
Yeah.
Anyways,
years.
So you used to be very narcissistic, thinking you're the best.
Well, I mean, and I wouldn't say to go that far. That's a little bit of an exaggeration.
You thought you were God.
But I was pretty psyched on my accomplishment, because getting through EMT wasn't, you know, it's not super hard, but it's not super easy. Yeah. But I felt accomplished, and I felt accomplished with the things that I had done as far as my ride-alongs.
And so what broke that confidence and ego down?
No, and I would say where I was going with that is that when the longer I did it on like a regular day-to-day basis, the more my ego died, kind of, or not, you know, died, but was beaten back
into better
like beaten and shaped into what it should be. Because I think that's kind of, you know, especially like young men, it's very easy to like, either you have nothing going for you and you hate the world, or you have everything going for you and you think you're the shit.
Yeah.
And and especially when you're like, you know, 18 to 22, that's very, you know, like that's just how it goes a little bit.
You don't have perspective. Everything.
Yeah, you have no relative perspective.
Yeah. So if any younger people are listening, when you're at a low, it's just temporary.
I know, and it sounds so bad to say, because you kind of sound like an asshole, like you're being like, yeah, you're just an idiot until you're about 25.
Everyone's been taught. I think I'm only 22, and I think at least till you're 22, you're pretty much a child.
I mean, and I would say that's, you know, it's very personal and individual, because, you know, everybody is so infinitely different as far as personality and wants and needs and development. But as a general rule, yeah, you know, and so I would say 22, like the 22-year-old version of someone and the 26-year-old version of someone are going to be very different people. I would say one of the largest differences in your life as far as time span goes.
Yeah, I think you can say that for anything except after 35. If you lose the want to learn, I think that's one of the most important things in life is you want to keep learning. And that's why I actually started up this podcast is so, I mean, the amount that someone's going to learn. Imagine you weren't an EMT and you just heard all that you just heard.
I would say I'm worried that it sounded like meshed garble of a confused mind, but no, yeah, it's that search for knowledge is huge, and that's one of the reasons I really was like, so, thank you again for having me on, of course.
Yeah,
but
happy to, man.
Yeah, I was so fascinated by this, because we've known each other for
years now.
Man, yeah, I was gonna try and put a number on it, but I don't know if I can.
I'd say 7. Sometime in high school.
Around like when you.
But then we didn't talk.
What year did you get into North? Like around.
I don't keep track of years. Anything before yesterday, I just don't even think about.
Yeah, so I'd say 6-7 years, something like that.
Yeah. But we didn't talk for a long part of it.
No,
you popped back up on my radar as an EMT right when my spouse was going to become an EMT, and I looked up on Reddit, and it was there was a thread of what is the worst things that you've experienced
as an EMT,
and I screenshotted all of them and how to read it, and she's like, I don't know if I can go through that.
Oh man, you
not to turn her away from it.
No, and it's understandable because I could understand that so much as having a significant other and how deeply trauma. I feel protective and love her to death and wouldn't want her to go through those things. And I wouldn't want her to be an EMT kind of, I would say the same things to her.
Even though you just talked most people into being an EMT.
Yeah.
What about your kid?
My own attempt.
Would you have your kid be an EMT?
Yeah, if that's what they wanted. I think that's kind of the bottom line with EMS and anything in life, it's like if you truly want it, then that's what's going to bring you happiness.
I don't think anyone knows what they want, man. I think when people say that, or they're like, you just got to have this drive, I'm like, no one has drive for anything until you start on the path
to doing it.
Yeah,
that's kind of that's sort of the juxtaposition is you got to go out and try some stuff and probably fail out of it.
Mm-hmm. Like you failed out of school.
Yeah, and that was like a really it was a very informative. Moment. It was a total blessing, and it was an informative experience because it was that period of time that forced me to grow up and be like, I think that's kind of one thing you have to take responsibility for yourself, and that was one thing that I'd kind of done my whole life was that when bad things had happened or things had not gone how I wanted them to, that I looked for reasons outside of myself that they'd happened.
Yeah.
And then pointed at those reasons, And that was kind of the first time in my life where I'd been forced to be like, you failed because it's your fault. You have no one else. There's no one else to blame. And, and then kind of from there you can branch out to every failure you've had is on you and your fault, through your lack of sacrifice and whatever part of that circumstance. And so that changed my life. And then going into EMS kind of, I guess, I would say intensified that feeling of personal responsibility of needing, it's like things weigh harder on you when you accept that they're your fault. And I would say, when you take true personal responsibility, I'll give you an example. Actually, I failed a class a while ago, and I was at the right when I not found out because I was trying to pass it, and then I just kind of at the very end it wasn't doable really, and the deadlines were it didn't work out, and I was pretty mad at first, and I was like, all these how upset I was with how the class was not ran, but with the material and this and that. And then within pretty quickly I was like, I could have done a lot more. I could have taken the time to contact my teachers. I could have taken the time to push harder than I did. Not that I didn't push. I really I put some solid effort in there, and I was really upset with the result of my effort.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's like you can't do that, man. You can't see, blame anyone but you. There were more things that I could have done to pass that class, and I didn't do them, and so that rests on my shoulders. And
so, what was that like? Was it more the finance of shit I have to repay for this class, or the time lost?
I would say both collectively. It was kind of a double punch on that, but it was a valuable lesson. It was a really valuable lesson. It was like kind of it was a reminder. It was like my life was testing me a little bit and being like, or that's what it felt like in my mind. I was like, it was an opportunity to to put to use lessons that I learned.
And so what you're explaining right here is a growth mindset, which not everyone has. So when you face something and you say, "Oh, that was bad luck," that's not a growth mindset. But
no,
but
when you face something and you're like, "What did I do? What steps did I take that led me to this? X on the ground where the piano dropped."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the foundation of starting to lead a better life, where you're eventually going to help people. I don't know. I've been very curious. Both my guests and now you. I've been asking people how they find meaning in life. And everyone seems to do it through helping others, which is an interesting kind of thing.
I would say helping others is definitely a huge part of it. And I would say that like people are, I'm sure you've heard the saying, people are beasts of burden, that our purpose is finding purpose and our meaning is finding meaning, kind of thing, that they kind of go hand in hand and that they're inseparable, but those ideas are very hard to merge, that having a meaningful life is about searching for it, kind of, and that's where the meaning comes from, is searching for meaning. And that's a very, that's kind of a convoluted way to put it, but
it is. But what's your respite from all this? Because it can be a lot to just be constantly on that grind. And
I worked really hard for a long time, and I kind of didn't take any time off for about the first, I would say, year and a half. I worked pretty much consistently.
Because you got to find a balance.
Yeah, and like I was a resident. I was living at a station at the time, and
do you have to pay rent?
No.
Oh,
so
nice.
You apply, and when you get accepted, you get a room, and the way that room works, and you have a living space too, and you have roommates, and the way that works is you're living at the station, and you are on call for 48 hours, and then you're off call for 96 hours.
96?
96. So 2 days straight, 2 24-hour, days on, and then 4 days off.
Okay.
And that goes constantly.
Yeah.
So it never stops. To live there, you have to, do these 48s. And they'll make time, if you have work or you have school, they'll let you, if I had class, I could leave to go to class during my shift.
Yeah. But what if you have to work all day and you work all night? Do you still have to finish out that 48 and stay up for 40? Yeah. But I imagine you wouldn't be making the best decisions if you've been up for 46 hours.
And that's kind of on you. That's there's a lot of personal responsibility as far as emergency medical services of, if you're showing up to a call, that means that you are basically by de facto saying, I'm here, I'm competent, sober, of stable mind, ready to do what's asked of me. And that's kind of de facto. It's de facto by, by the nature of doing it.
Yeah.
So that there's kind of it's on you. If I got too frazzled out on a 48-hour shift and I went on a call and I made a really bad mistake, it would be a mistake, but it would still be on me.
Yeah.
I chose to go on that call when I did or didn't know that I was in that state, So there's a lot of, it's on
so
you.
Can you decline a call during your 48 hours?
I mean, if you had to, or, but it's really more about coverage. So my roommate, if I had I had a couple of times where I ran calls all night. I had to be up at 8 a.m. to do truck checks. I got through that day. By about 5, 6 o'clock, I'm totally crashing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey man, you just got home from work. You want to go on, you want to hang out and cover me for the next 5 hours so I can sleep.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it would go. And we'd kind of just trade back and forth that way with each other. And the station that I was at averaged about, I think it was 4 point something or 3 point something calls every 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
Average. So, and there was about 1,700 calls a year. I think they broke 1,700 calls a year this last year. And so it's it's not a lot, but it's enough.
Yeah.
Kind of, if you think about that, a call every 8 hours. Something like that.
Yeah, you can never fully relax. You're always
no, but and there's no rhyme or reason too. We had days where it was 3 days in a row of no calls at all. We sat around. And then, 24-hour period where we have 40.
Whoa.
So
that'd be pretty rough.
And that was during snow. That was down power lines, car crash, everything. But
so to take it back a minute.
Yeah, we'll take it back.
You go to a call and it's your mom. How does that affect your judgment?
And I guess for me personally, I would like to think that it wouldn't. I'd like to think that I could run that call objectively, because the best way for me to help someone is to run that call objectively and not be emotionally invested. And that's what I would try to do. Whether I would do that or not, it's obviously situational, but that would be my ideal of running a call on a family member, is that I could separate myself and be objective. And hopefully, honestly, I'd have someone that is higher level and more experienced than me there to run it.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
No, once you're the paramedic from Florida.
And once you're the medic, then it would be on you, unless you have, and that's like the other thing too, is like I've worked with people that it's one thing to be a paramedic, but it's one other thing to be a paramedic who's been doing it for like 32 years.
And what do you mean? What do you mean? What's the difference?
Like the level, I think that the level of, you can't even compare those two people. That a paramedic who's just out of school and a paramedic who's 30 years deep, that's not even, like, you can't, like, that's like apples and bananas,
You'd rather have the paramedic.
Oh, I'd rather have that guy with 30 years in a heartbeat.
Even though, so I imagine school has the top of the line knowledge. Are you being retaught?
Yeah, and so there's continuing education in EMS, and how well that works is, I think, dependent on where you are and who you are. Mm-hmm. But as far as paramedics go, I think that most of them, if not all, are, for the most part, up to date on everything. And that you're not going to, depending, I'm sure that there's definitely people who get lax and let things slip, I'm sure. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, I think that experience is more valuable than the education.
Yeah, so this is
and for me as being an EMT, that was my experience as well. That like getting through school was a lot of knowledge, and that was like really good, and I needed that information.
Yeah.
But as far as like actually helping someone on a call, I was not equipped to do that until I had practical experience.
Okay, so this is gonna be a first. I really need to go pee, but I want to continue this. So
yeah.
I'm gonna have you go into the mic as best you can. I'll add reverb and stuff, and when I come back, I'm curious about the story of you losing a friend to a gunshot.
Okay.
All right. See you in 2 minutes.
All right.
Give me your best ohm.
Now I gotta ask you, where did this teapot come from?
All right. I'll learn not to drink as much water. You didn't keep ohming, man.
Yeah, I'm not a big ohmer.
It's okay. I'll add it in post.
Okay. But don't worry. I'm probably not gonna watch it because like the sound of hearing my own voice is like nightmarish to me.
Yeah, a lot of people get to that point.
No, I mean, for some reason it's just kind of from always. From the first time I ever heard a recording of my voice, I was like, I don't want to hear that.
And why do you think that is?
I don't know. Maybe it's because your voice is different when you talk.
Yeah.
And that hearing it not sound like the way you hear it is a contradiction of your reality in some way that's upsetting,
but But if other people like listening to your voice, like, why wouldn't you like it?
Well, that I wouldn't wager on that either, but
yeah.
No, it's just kind of it's a weird thing. I will probably watch it, but yeah. Do you have that when you hear your own voice on recording? Is it kind of like you're like, oh, like?
Yeah. So when I was 19, the way I learned audio engineering and stuff, because this is a one-man team between setting these up and shooting them and editing them and everything. Mm-hmm. So when I was 19, I made an album. It's garbage. No, it's okay. But by doing that, I had to get really used to my own voice, and then also through editing these. I mean, you said maybe I'll listen to it, but I'm like, I have to listen to it like twice over just to edit through it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you can like cut out the snippets where I'm like totally making no sense.
No, actually, the whole thing is I'll never. Even when I go pee there, I'm just gonna take your ohm and just put a run for reverb. So I'll be like, ohm. I saw it on Joe Rogan at like episode 200 or something with Duncan Truss. So I'm like,
oh man, one of his real early ones.
Yeah, I've started listening to those, and I like his earlier episodes.
Yeah,
more.
Because everything that's like popular on YouTube is in like the thousands. 900 to 1,000 range. Yeah.
But anyways, okay, so you have experienced the loss of a close friend when you were right next to him. What happened?
So I'm trying to think how to start this whole story. It goes back. There's a lot to unpack. the short and dirty is that a friend of mine was confronted at a skate park by a guy who was mentally ill and had a firearm, and they didn't know that he had a firearm at the time, so they kind of, I think, confronted him to some degree. I really don't know, like, you know, I don't know all the very specifics of the situation, but at the end of the day, the guy shot him 4 times and shot someone else once, and the friend of mine that was shot ended up passing away, I think at the scene or at the hospital. I really don't know exactly. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of there right after. It was like it had happened and we were there within, you know, like there was not very much time lapse. Yeah. So we walked up to this scene before it had been,
before the EMTs got there.
Yeah, before anyone had got there. So it was brutal, man. It was super brutal. And
yeah, what was that like?
You know, actually, I feel like to some degree I don't have there's like no emotional experience there.
Did you cry?
You know, no, I didn't. I did afterwards. I'm not like immediately afterwards, but like in the months afterwards, yes. Mm-hmm. And kind of went through the grieving process in like whatever way. And it's weird because it wasn't so much like it was like it like broke this like veil I had around my life or something that like,
but you're gonna die someday.
Yeah, I mean, and not so much that of like the senselessness of life, you know. That like this was a dude like that day. Okay, so this guy, his name's John David Mills, very cool man, super awesome dude. I have his initials tattooed on my hand. That day he had brought food and burgers and barbecued for everyone at the skate park, fed people in the park, you know, hung out. And at the time I had a broken leg and a broken arm, and he was like super supportive. Like, you know, we kind of I actually was in a pretty rough place at the time. And that day we had a conversation. He was like, man, like, you know, I remember him saying, the only bitch you need to worry about is your leg or something like that. And I was like, because I was upset about some girl or something like that. And he was just that kind of guy that kind of like, dude, pick it up and move forward, you know, and looked at my x-rays with me. And we just had this like a pretty, you know, heart-to-heart conversation. And then he died like 20 minutes later. So it was like this like weird, you know, kind of like I had survivor's guilt a little bit, you know, like if things would have been different, if, you know, time would have played out, you know, if the timeline would have played out differently, that could have been me or someone else that I was immediately there with. And see, you know, and I struggled with it a lot, you know. It sent me into a pretty deep depression, and I didn't know how to cope with that. Like, didn't know how to cope with him dying or kind of my loss of innocence of that, like it was so senseless, you know. It was like this guy that had done like all these like only done good things for me my whole life basically, and like had been a good friend, and, you know, just kind of like one of the older kids at the skate park that you know, I'd known him for at least like 12 years, something like that.
Wow, that's some time.
Yeah, and you know, and not crazy personally that whole time, but, you know, I saw, you know, I didn't go a long time without seeing him. Yeah. And it was brutal, man. And I kind of like, I struggle with that meaning, like that sort of like what is like, you know, and to me for a long time life didn't have a meaning. And then I was like, it's just like senseless and fucked up, and like you could do all the right things and be a good person, and someone's gonna shoot you in the head, or, you know, that kind of, that like very nihilistic, like negative view of the world.
And what broke you out of that?
It was a slow process, you know. I fell off the rails. I was partying too hard. I was, you know, like I wasn't abusing drugs and alcohol as much as I was like abusing myself, kind of, you know, that I wasn't in danger of being like a drug addict or an alcoholic. I was in danger of bringing myself to a place mentally where I could like harm myself, I guess. Oh, wow. And it didn't get to that point. Like it never got to like, I'm going to kill myself. It was just like, life has no meaning and I can't escape it. And it's just going to like devour me and everything else, kind of, you know.
What were the substances you used at that time of your life?
You know, alcohol mainly. but kind of, it was more of like, I kind of like lived a blackout, you know, like for about 4 or 5 months, I was really like, I was on an alcoholic bender and I took drugs, but I, you know, as far as like my memories of that time, I really couldn't tell you, you know, like.
Did that take a toll on your friendships and relationships if you were in one at the time?
Totally. I wasn't in a relationship at the time. I was actually just getting out of one.
So that adds to it.
Yeah. Well, actually, you know what's funny about that is it put it in perspective. Like I was actually really upset about this relationship at the time. I'd been like, felt really like cheated over or, you know, kind of like screwed over by this person. And then after that had happened, it instantly made me realize how little that meant and how petty my anger and upsetness was, and actually ended up apologizing to that person and being like, I had no perspective of why I was so upset.
Did they accept apology?
Oh yeah, actually, yeah. Nice. And so I was in that dark place, and you know, it was
abusing alcohol. And
abusing alcohol, substances.
What kicked you out of that?
Actually, you know, myself kind of. You know, I got to this point, and like part of it was that.
A place of pain or emotional or physical?
I'm trying to think. No, it was more like I realized it was unsustainable. There was a point in time where I was like, if I keep doing this, it's like one of 3 things is going to happen. Like I'm going to end up dead or in jail, or I'm going to keep using drugs, which is worse. That's like the worst of those 3 options, you know, in a way. Like they all are hell in their own right.
I'd say abusing, but not using, but yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say the drug, you know, I don't think there are some drugs that I don't think you can like, that not have no medicinal qualities, but that if you use them, if for anything besides the specific thing that they're for, then they're like, it's just like playing with fire.
If you were to call
like opioids, like, you know, it's like you shouldn't take opioids if you don't have pain. And if you do have pain, you should take the minimum amount of opioids necessary to deal with that pain and get through it. And that's.
Have you ever experienced opioid addiction?
Yeah. So at that time, and that was part, I guess when I say substances, it sounds very broad, you know, and I'm not a super.
Did you use or abuse psychedelics at that point in your life?
Yes, actually, yeah.
And were those tougher experiences, or were they more insightful?
No. You know, not really. They were more like centering. They were very like kind of eye-opening, and they made me self-reflect on like what I was doing and why I was doing it.
Do you think they helped with your healing process?
Yeah. I would say yes.
But the opiates.
So I was prescribed at the time. I was prescribed opiates, and I was also
for your broken arm that you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, I had a broken wrist, and I had a broken kneecap.
Okay. From skateboarding?
Yeah, from skateboarding.
Rough. Okay. So you had opiates.
And so they were giving me opiates, and they were giving me muscle relaxers, and they were giving me like anti-anxiety medication.
Xanax kind of thing?
Yeah, I think they were Xanax. And what they were trying to do is keep me from moving around.
Yeah.
Because my leg couldn't bend, you know, like I couldn't bend my leg at the knee for I don't know how many months, a few months.
So you went through a rough place of depression.
And you know, and it was like kind of these 3 things coincided in my life, all kind
injury, abuse of drugs,
injury,
and trauma.
I mean, actually injury, the end of my relationship that I was having at the time, and then the trauma of losing a friend.
Okay.
And that kind of and in that period of time, I really wasn't doing that well. Period. You know. And then,
when you say doing that well, period, do you mean
like I wasn't happy. I was doing okay financially. You know, I wasn't. I wasn't killing it or anything, but I wasn't hungry.
But that wasn't another part.
That wasn't an issue. I was just kind of not a happy person.
Do you think it was a search for meaning, or do you think you just didn't have the perspective?
I think that I was immature, and I didn't have the perspective to see what things were worth wasting energy on and what things weren't.
And what's that perspective if you want to talk to a 22-year-old you?
Yeah, man.
Right now, who's watching this? What's that perspective? So he doesn't have to go through that same stuff.
That perspective is take responsibility for yourself. Grow up, man. Don't think that you can do it later, because later never comes. You know, right now is right now.
Yeah.
And so like, you can't put things off. And so that's kind of, you know, if I had a time machine and I were going to go back and influence my life, that's what I would do. I would pull my life together before any of those things happened.
Mm-hmm. Pull your life together in what way?
And
did you find routine or bring on a burden?
Well, I guess for me it's more specific. It's like I would have gone to paramedic school. I've gone to EMT school right out of high school, and I would have gone to paramedic school after that, and I'd already have been working, you know? And that's kind of something like it's not really worth dwelling on, you know, and everyone's on their own journey. Yeah. But it took me a while to like grow up to the point where I could do this and like be a functioning adult. And I was kind of a late bloomer, you know, like really I didn't like have an adult life until I was probably like 23 years old.
What do you mean adult life?
An adult life to where like, I would say working a regular job and just paying the rent is not an adult life.
So what is
an adult life? Is not only maintaining, but doing the things to progress outside of that maintenance. Progress financially, like emotionally, physically, all of those things, you know, it's a very wide spectrum of health. But I think that's what being, you know, a truly responsible adult is managing all those parts of your life in an efficient and methodical way.
Yeah.
You know, that you're tasting every pot and making sure everything's up to date and in order. You know, that if you're
looking back, this is going to be tough. Looking back, do you think your parents were at that point of living an adult life when they were raising you?
Yes.
They were.
Yeah. See, and okay, that's another one. So I'm unlike a lot of people, unlike most people that I know, my parents are together. And not only are they together, they have a happy, healthy, functioning relationship. Yeah. I mean, and love. No, but they're really awesome people.
What was that right there? What do you think about love?
No, well, I would say in love is in my mind is something that happens to people at the beginning of a relationship, and that's kind of, it's more fleeting and it doesn't do what marriage is justice. You know,
what do you mean by that?
That like
coming from, you're not married.
Yeah, I'm not married. No. That being like in love it's kind of a state of mind, but marriage is a lifestyle.
Yeah.
Or that being, I would not even marriage, but being in a true relationship is a lifestyle. It is like you are changing a lot of things about not only your mindset and your actions, but your day-to-day activity, your thought process. Like that's like a huge, I mean, it's a large portion of who you are as a person. You're not changing, but.
What's a part of you that you wouldn't change? If you had a spouse who wasn't okay with you experiencing being an EMT, but you love them more than anything, would you stop being an EMT, or is that a road you wouldn't cross?
I would choose. I believe in people choosing themselves first before they choose relationships. And if I had someone that wasn't supportive of something that I need to do to, or not need to do that I want to do as a career and that brings me satisfaction in my life, I wouldn't want to be with someone that didn't want me to do that, you know?
But it's out of love because they don't want you to experience trauma, because one day you could show up to something.
And I think that there's a validity to that, but I also think too that like on the flip side, say if my girlfriend was like, I really want to, whatever it was, a dangerous I want to be a skydiver. I want to be a skydiving instructor.
Yeah.
No matter how anxious and agitated that like made me, not agitated, but like upset, or if you know, if that was like
anxious. That's
anxious. Yeah, anxious. That if you truly love that person and you want them to be happy, then you were going to support them.
But health is a part of happiness. What if you'd be okay with her taking temporary happiness over one day she become paralyzed from being a skydiver, and then how?
Yeah, and that's kind of, I would say I would lean on personal responsibility there. That like I want to be in a relationship, like my relationship now. I have an amazing relationship. Love the girl that I'm with. You know, could see myself being with her for the rest of my life, and I would be happy with that.
Do you have any huge disagreement that doesn't have an answer?
No, actually,
really?
No.
How long have you been together?
9 months.
Okay. Are you still in the honeymoon phase, or are you toward the marriage stage?
See, and it's somewhere in the middle of there. You know, I haven't ever had a fight with her. I haven't ever like argued with her, really. I mean, you know, we discuss.
You presented arguments.
Yeah, we present.
You haven't
discuss.
Fought, but you've argued.
Yeah, but I've never raised my voice at her, and she's never raised her voice at me. Kind of, you know, and that like there's like very mutual respect, and part of it's because we have very similar senses of humor.
Yeah.
And that's mostly what our relationship is like. Our foundation is humor, so that's kind of like, it's just always kind of a constant joke and, you know, messing around and that sort of thing. But it's also a big commitment.
Yeah.
You know, and that I don't think, you know, a saying I really like is nothing in life worth having is free, and anything free isn't worth having.
Okay. So what are some if
some
you know, prices you paid to be in this? Or some parts of you that you've...
Well, I would say they're the same as a lot of relationships. You know, that you have to put your own needs and pride and, you know, kind of self, not to the side.
I thought you just said that you should put yourself
No,
first.
no. See, and I'm contradicting myself, but in my mind I'm not. No, that you have to, well, if that's what you want, you know, it has to be a willing sacrifice. I guess that's what I would say. It's like, you should do what's best for you. And if that relationship is what's best for you, then you're going to do those things for it.
That's a good theme you've had, is take responsibility for your own life. That's the theme I'm more or less getting
from and that, you know, that's kind of, well, and that's what's helped me, you know, pull my fat out of the fire, so to speak, you know, and have a normal life and live sober and not, you know, like.
But so after that experience where you were like, there's no meaning for any of this, how did you all of a sudden switch from that to a life?
I moved. Well, one thing that I did was I moved. All right. Well, so at one point, you know, I got to this point and I was like, this is going to end badly. I'm really in this like downward spiral. I had a moment of clarity.
Were you in tears at that moment? Do you have like an exact memory, or is it like a generalized?
Actually I don't. It was kind of generalized. It was like it was kind of more of a slow creeping.
You never had,
you know, it was something that
and
it was something that I knew from day one. You know, from like the day that I started dealing with those issues, I knew that it was unsustainable, and I knew that I was the only person that could pull myself out of it, and everything that I did was to hide from that truth.
Do you think you gained anything from that experience in life?
Yes.
And what did you gain?
Not
just so people don't have to go through it.
Being unwilling to go back to it. You know, that things, no matter how hard things get and no matter how difficult the things that I face in my life are, I won't lay down and give up, or I won't go back to hiding, you know? Like there's no hiding from it. And that's kind of like, I think that's...
You think it was hiding or a vacation from life?
I mean, you know, vacation and hiding are... that's a little interchangeable to some degree.
If you get to the end of it, so say you're financially free, wouldn't your goal be to vacation for the rest of your life? Would you keep working? Don't even say you'd keep working. You're on vacation for the rest of your life. Are you hiding, or would you still?
No, I think I would still work.
You would still work.
Yeah, I would still work, and not so much, and maybe not for money. You know, I might do a volunteer spot, but yeah, I would still. You know, for me, that's kind of like. It's one of the things that helps me go about my day to day, is that like everything that I do in my own life for myself personally that brings me up as a person and helps me grow as a person is going to benefit someone else because of what I do.
Yeah.
And that the more that I can grow as a person and push myself forward to take those steps of whatever they need, you know, whatever those might be to better myself, that's the best thing that I can do for other people. And I think that's kind of, you know, it's like one of those things where people, they think benefiting other people kind of comes first, or they, you know, like they don't equivalate those two. Yeah, that you gotta, like, if you want to help someone, if you want to be a benefit to the world, man, you need to help yourself first.
Yeah, that's
and you need to be a person that's put together and articulate and smart and can, you know, navigate things in the world without falling apart or being upset when they don't go their way. So I mean. All right, I want to go back to that because I feel like I could elaborate that a little bit better about the relationships.
Okay, go for it.
That if both people, you know, that for a relationship to work, like a true relationship, like you're married or you're engaged?
Not government wise, but yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So, you're dedicating yourself to this relationship. And that requires sacrifice, but it's that same thing of willing sacrifice. You know, like burdens are easier to bear if they're willing, you know, and you got to like believe in it, man. Like that's kind of, I think that's like the trick of relationships. And now with modern times, man, it's a lot scarier. It's a lot weirder to, like, you know, that dating is a lot different than it was 10 years ago with technology. I would say that's the biggest way things have changed as far as people meeting and then dating is that technology has a foothold in that.
Yeah.
And not just like a foot. Thing? I mean, when it comes to technology, I wouldn't say negative or positive. I just think that there are new issues and new problems.
And what would that new issue be? Are you talking about people meeting online?
Yeah. I mean, not so much that specifically, but as far as like, let's say, I mean, from the broad spectrum of people meeting online, like Tinder, Bumble, all that sort of thing, all the way up to, looking at your significant other's social media accounts to, spouses who are like, or looking through someone's, like whatever it is, that technology is like, it's more insidious than it has been, that like the outside world creeps in on people or, is in people's homes a lot more with the internet than it has been before. And that there's like, that things happen a lot faster.
Yeah, that's a fine line. So would you be okay with your partner having male friends, and if she?
And I would say like, as far as that goes, it's very like I would say that's very personal and specific. Kind of like if something makes you uncomfortable, you should probably say something.
I mean,
if you don't like
open
something,
relationships. This is a spectrum, just like everything. This is a spectrum.
Yeah.
I'm curious, where do you fit on that spectrum? Open relationships to so monogamous.
I would say, like for me personally, I would want my relationship now, but also, in general, to be monogamous sexually and emotionally.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
That like that person is committed to you sexually and emotionally, and that outside of that, everything they do is their business. So would you, kind of thing, like.
Well, would you be okay with your partner seeing a male therapist, knowing that she's like mentally or emotionally banging her?
That's a tough one. No, I totally would. I wouldn't feel comfortable
to see a female therapist.
I wouldn't. It wouldn't matter to me.
But that is an emotional relationship. She is, instead of bearing her soul to you and sharing that, that time when she's being very vulnerable, she's doing it with a different guy. You don't think that'd be painful for you?
But I think that's sort of the I can like relate to that because of the public trust. That person's a doctor. To become a doctor is it's a very rigorous process, and for someone to behave unprofessionally. No, I'm not saying physically.
Okay,
I'm saying that like not like I'm saying emotionally.
Yeah.
That and I think that psychologists and therapists and clinical psychologists, that's a very dangerous and fine line to walk, and I'm sure that lots of times people fall in love with their therapists or that sort of thing. But I think that you have to place some trust in people on some level.
Yeah.
And that, and I would say that's also partly your partner too. It's like, if you trust and believe in your partner, then you're not going to be worried about them going to see a male therapist.
But I'm curious why you went to checking in on your partner's social media. Is that something you've done?
No, actually. I've never done that in a relationship. I had someone do it to me in a relationship.
How'd that make you feel?
Well...
Did you really care? If you had nothing to hide, why would you care?
And so that's the thing. It was more complex than that. I didn't have anything to hide as far as like not being faithful, but I did have something to hide as far as the people that I was communicating with that she didn't want me to communicate with.
Okay.
And it was kind of a controlling relationship in that regard. So it was kind of the invasion of privacy was already there. And so that wasn't like too big of a deal. It was just like a catalyst, Yeah. And I was very young at this time. I was in my early teens, sort of thing. But I just think that like technology at the reach of the fingertips has changed the way people have relationships, especially people our age. For older people, it's like my parents.
They ignore it.
Their smartphone is just like a fancy flip phone to them. Like they don't, and like obviously they like look on Craigslist and stuff, but it's not the same thing to them. They don't have
Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, Reddit.
Yeah, exactly, man.
That is a lot.
And that people our age, if you're getting into a relationship, you're not getting into a relationship with just that person. You're getting into a relationship with them on I would call it like, it's almost like the cyborg version of yourself. The you that is extended out onto technology, your social media accounts.
How do you think you've extended out? What's your cyborg? because I haven't looked into your social media.
Oh, really?
Like,
okay.
But is like
my social media is really outdated, actually. Okay. I haven't really used. I used to, like, when I was younger, I used it a lot, and then I kept the same account, but I stopped using it until I kind of still I don't post or really do anything social media wise anymore.
So if you're really in love with someone, but they're posting, like, say they love Trump, but you hate him.
That's an interesting...
Because then you're associated with someone who a lot of your friends and family are probably like, why are you associating with this person? It's more public, I guess.
It's your relationship. And so this person is by de facto an extension of you, and they are by de facto an extension of their social media self. Whatever media that is, like this, I'm here talking about this stuff, and my girlfriend, she probably knows. It would reflect. It would, but just her or reflect on me, or
who's it going to reflect on? Like, do you really care what your friends think, or is it what your parents think?
Actually, my biggest concern as far as doing the interview was talking about this sort of thing, as far as like, not like future employers, but as far as like, as I would be concerned coming on here with the title that I have, that I'm representing people of my profession adequately.
I think you're representing people here, man. We've gotten a little bit more personal.
Yeah.
But I think you've done a good job representing people. But
well, and that's kind of like one thing that would change my view of things when I got into the fire service more than the EMS side was that it's kind of like lots of people. I'll give you an example. Lots of people have 343 tattoos. The number is 343. It's how many firefighters died in the 9/11 attacks.
Oh, wow.
It's how many died in the World Trade Centers because they like ran in to try and get people out when the buildings were collapsing. So lots of people have that tattoo. They have 343. But it's like that, like you're standing on the shoulders of people that came before you.
Yeah.
And that their hard work and sacrifice is getting carried on by you, kind of. And that you have a moral and personal obligation to live up to that to the best of your abilities. And that's kind of, and that's where my concern would be, that like, I don't want someone to have a, see me and be like, oh, he's an EMT and I totally think he's an asshole, and like, now is that our EMTs just, dicks or, that sort of thing. But yeah, so, I mean, as far as anxieties that I had coming in here, that would probably be my biggest one. Yeah. And reflecting badly, it's like, it's hard to talk about a lot, like, mental illness, drug abuse, those sort of things. Those are pretty touchy topics.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to like the professional job that we do. So I had concerns about that, but I think that the benefits outweigh the risk. And that the reason that I really, I was really adamant about wanting to come on here and talk to you, because I feel like if there is a chance that I could influence or change someone's mind into doing what I do, into doing, or just spurring them to take that first step and look into it a little more deeply when they might not otherwise have, that could change someone's life. And that if I have the opportunity to do something like that, then I should set my personal issues aside and try and do the best that I can. So, yeah.
That's a whole lot. I guess I feel like we stopped a couple conversations halfway through, but I don't really recall what they were,
No, I mean, and we kind of, that's sort of me as a person. I'm very like, I jump from topic to topic just kind of regularly.
Yeah, so where do you see your life going from here in a perfect world?
In a perfect world, I'm moving in.
Oh wow.
6 days?
Okay. Whoa, shit.
Yeah. 6 days, something like that. But we're doing a cross country road trip.
Nice.
We bought a national.
You and your partner.
Yeah, we bought a national parks pass, so you can camp at national parks. We have a decent amount of money saved up, so we're gonna road trip for a month or more.
Wow.
And go kind of just jump from national park to national park.
Yeah. Do you have an RV or a?
We have a car. Well, a Subaru that we like. I cut the seats out. I cut the trunk out. Like all the flat
everything
trim work.
Except the front two seats.
Everything except for the front two seats, and then I installed built a little a plywood stand basically that sits back there and stays level. And then
is it hanging from the ceiling?
No, it's actually has supports. Like it has like 4 supports that are.
So you can put stuff under it and then sleep
and you
on
can
top?
no, we're gonna sleep on top of it. So it's like a bed on top, and then storage underneath, and then we have a topper. You know, and I think that most of the time we're gonna be just camping.
Yeah.
But
and you've been together for how long?
I figured that we should
You've been together for how long? Do you think this is going to test the relationship
9 months
in a way?
No.
Wow.
No.
Have you spent a month together? You don't live together, do you?
Yeah, we live together.
You live together. Okay,
we started living together like 2 months or 3 months in.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty when we were friends for, probably like I would say 3 to 4 months before we were ever in a relationship. We were both doing our own thing kind of, and like we're friends, and our friendship kind of just grew more and more, and then we started hanging out.
Yeah.
We both, at the time we both were like seeing people, and then we were both single kind of later on, and we just started hanging out more, and we were really good friends for a few months.
Was it you or her that made the first step and like I like you as more than a friend?
It was always there. It was one of those things that was like there from the very beginning, and
someone has to say
there was tension, yeah. And it kind of just like slowly happened. It was very gradual. It wasn't like some immediate like boom, now we're doing all these things that couples do. It was like slowly over time, and we kind of weren't really acknowledging it, and we hadn't really talked about it until probably like 2 months after we'd started like really having a thing. We were like, okay, so what are we actually doing here?
Yeah.
And then from that point we were like, do we want to get serious about this? And then once we kind of both mutually decided that we were in fact interested in trying to be together and wanted to make this a serious relationship
forever, hypothetically.
Yeah, I mean,
like
and so that's kind of,
okay.
and so that's weird, So it's like you're starting to date someone, you're like, do you want to date? And that's like basically saying you're taking that chance to make that forever.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's kind of that's a little bit of a squirrely way to think about it,
And so if your girlfriend wanted to do a dangerous career, you'd be okay with that?
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that's just kind of, in my perspective, in my mind, my duty to her is to support her and like make sure that she is able to do the things that she needs to do to be okay and be happy. And if that's one of those things, then it's my job as a significant other that even if that stresses me out, even if that gives me anxiety, that I need to step up and deal with that for her sake. And I think that's kind of like, that's like relationships, it's like you're not doing it because you have to, you're doing it because you care about this relationship and you want it to work. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, that's like one of the secret, and that's like this relationship has helped me learn a lot of things and put a lot of lessons that I learned before in past relationships to use that I hadn't previously. Yeah. And so, I think that was one of the keys to success of making it work. And one of the other ones is just that we're and that we're emotionally compatible.
Yeah.
Like
that's a big
very
comedy compatible.
Yeah.
That's the biggest
comedy
thing.
Compatible and like emotionally compatible, that we're very like
you go highs and lows together.
No, it's more that we don't really have really highs or lows. That we're both kind of very like level people, and that we're not like I spilled the pepper, so I'm gonna like lose it.
Yeah, no.
That like that sort of thing is just, we're very kind of like low key, and there's definitely stressful times, but I think that we both help each other manage stress and not cause more of it.
Nice, that's a good thing.
And that's really like I couldn't imagine doing the job that I do, and well, actually I can because I've done it, but I've coming like doing that job and then coming home to fight with someone will like break you down so quickly. It just like you have no emotional ground to stand on, because like if you're trying to process going on a call, then you need stability in your life outside of that. You need like stability to compensate for that chaos that you've just experienced. Like you need to come home to like
the most
safety and comfort and calmness, or I guess calm's kind of or fun or whatever it would be.
Yeah. What do you want it to be? Relaxing.
I guess I don't really have that's kind of my thing, is I'm all about surprises, man. Like okay. I don't need it to be some specific certain way. It's going to be the way it is, and then I'm going to form my opinion about it, kind of, cuz it's just you can't control I can't control if she had a bad day at work or not.
Yeah.
That sort of You know, so you kind of have to just play it as it comes and be flexible. You know, that's another thing that I've learned in this relationship is that you really got to be flexible. And if you want something to work, then there is no like say like, you know, I've decided like I want this relationship to work. I feel like this girl could, you know, be someone I could spend my life with. Then I need to do the things that I can to the best of my knowledge to make that a reality. You know, that it doesn't happen just cause like you can't just be like, oh, we're in love now. Like we're just going to like stay together forever. It's like, it's hard work, man. And you got to sacrifice and you got to put your feelings aside and you got to, you know, do things for the greater good of both of you and not just yourself. And that sounds kind of like very like simplistic, I would say, but it's on a lot of levels, you know.
I'm curious, what's at the end of all these roads for you? What do you think's the purpose of all of it, of saving people, of doing anything? Like you say you find meaning temporarily, but then it's like at the end of the day,
you know, it's not a sticking meaning. That's because you can feel really good about a call, you know. And I've had calls where we made really good saves, and I was like, yeah, man, like this is why I do this job. This is the best. That feeling is not forever. And I would say it's partly that you have to, you know, you can't climb a mountain and sit up there and admire forever. There's another guy who's a podcaster who has a saying like that like when you get to the top of a mountain, you can't sit around and admire your accomplishment forever. You better start climbing another mountain. Yeah. And I think that's kind of, you know, life for me. That's what I need my life to be, is that I'm going to set small goals, you know, like I'm going to be an EMT. So I became an EMT, and now I'm like, no, for me, and then it was like, I'm going to be a paid EMT. Because it's one thing to get your EMT and volunteer, because they'll accept you, but to get an actual job, and not like I got some crazy high-class job or anything, but I got one. I got a paid EMS job, and I was like, whoa, yeah, man. Yeah. And then I worked that job, and I kind of was getting bored. Like, I wasn't really, like, I wasn't being challenged. And so I was like, okay, next mountain to climb. I need to be a paramedic. And then when I get to paramedic, I'm going to work as a paramedic until I feel like I'm not gaining as much personally as I could from it. And I'm going to move up again. And I don't know what that'll look like. And I'm not sure what direction, you know, and I'm not really like a very specific plan person. But as far as those chunks, you know, that's how I've kind of divided my life out, is like right now it's paramedic. It's like getting to that point, getting that certification. That's what my life's work is right now. And once I get past that, then I'll worry about the rest.
Yeah, I like that. Just kind of get up to the top of the mountain. But then there's usually a refractory period where you're like, now what do I do?
Yeah, exactly. And the refractory periods I think are very dangerous. You know, like that you can.
That's when it's easiest.
Easiest to fall into either like drug or alcohol abuse, or become complacent, or become unfocused with your direction. Like you can't.
What was the heat of that alcohol and drug abuse like for you?
Very dissociated. You know, like I would say that's how I would describe it. Would be like, for me, that's what that lifestyle brought, was a me that was dissociated from reality and from life. You know,
because you were hiding.
Yeah, and like I wasn't thinking of myself as a whole person. I was kind of like, it was like you live day to day, you know, and moment to moment and high to high, or whatever that might be, or drunk to drunk, or whatever those people are doing, that escapism is like, it's very uniform. It looks the same in everybody, you know, like it's,
and what do you think that is for people maybe just getting into that? What does the beginning of that look like, so people can get out before they get in?
You know, I would say if you're going there, then you already have used drugs or alcohol. Obviously,
but people can occasionally use
it. Yeah. Oh no, totally. No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that like if you're starting to fall into that pattern, you already have used those drugs or alcohol before. Probably nobody like gets depressed and they're like, okay, I'm gonna go try crack. Like, you know what I mean? That's just not very. So, I would say, you know, you have to be honest with yourself. You have to be brutally honest, and you have to be like, am I not well, and am I masking that by using drugs or alcohol? And it's like, and I feel like that sounds like a very like complex thing to ask someone, but I think in reality, when it comes down to the nitty gritty, people know. Yeah. You know, and I think that's part of the syndrome of using like that, is that you are in denial. You are in denial to yourself, and you're in denial to other people, and that the only way out is to see past that denial. Yeah. And so
what were your psychedelic trips like at that time? Were they pretty much just telling you, hey, you got to stop and pursue a new path?
No, they were very, very like abstract. They weren't like, there was never really a rhyme or reason, and they were very like have emotional swings kind of, you know, it'd be like laughing to crying, or like let's get up and go do something to I want to lay down on the ground and not move. You know, very like flip-floppy.
Yeah. You were even using that as escapism.
Yeah, that I wasn't centering myself, you know. But you know, and a lot of them are really really like not fun, honestly. Like not fun at all, like miserable, honestly. But at the end of the day, it put things in perspective. And I think one thing that like, especially when I was younger, when I was like a kid, you know, maybe like 13, 14, 15, I experimented with psychedelics, and I was so great. Like, I remember that, like, I was so grateful to be back in reality. The first time I ever took hallucinogens, you know, I think I was like 14, 15, something like that. And I was like, when I came down, I was so happy to be sober again. I was so happy that like I wasn't gonna like fry out forever, that it like turned me off for a very long time again.
Yeah.
And I was like, it made me value reality. I was like, man, I enjoy knowing that like I'm alive, and that,
it's
you know,
in a different way. Like if you take opiates or something, you don't get that, even though you are escaping from reality, maybe even in more of a sense, but you don't get that like, shit, I'm losing valuable time. The only thing that's
and that I'd say too with hallucinogenic drugs, that your time perception's out the window. So you're like, 1 hour, you know, could feel like a whole week, and you're, you know, and that's kind of like, it's like you're forced to have that conversation with yourself. I think that's what I think people gain from psychedelics, is that they are forced to look at themselves objectively, and not only that, forced to have an important conversation with themselves.
It's not fun.
No, it's not fun. Like, and you know, and like, and it's something that like for me personally, that part of my life is done. Okay. You know, that I wouldn't, and you know, even if I stopped working in EMS, and even if I felt like that would be a positive thing for me, I don't know that I would do it again.
Okay.
You know, and given the circumstances now, I'm going to, you know, continue to be sober as long as I...
Do you drink alcohol?
Occasionally.
So you're not sober?
No, well,
and that's a really weird thing in society, how it's like people almost value being sober when there are tools out there, like things like ketamine, MDMA, and psilocybin are proven to help so many people with anxiety, trauma.
But there's, you know, there's a huge stigma around that, and then especially in something like what I do. You know,
and why is there stigma in it with what you do?
Because it's that public image thing, that like you want to think of your EMTs or your medics or your doctors or your lawyers as people that don't do the kind of shitty things that pretty much everyone does. Yeah. You know, kind of, and I think that
if you were to be having a heart attack, would you want the paramedic to come to you, to have tried mushrooms in their life, or to have not?
I don't think that it would make a difference.
Really?
I don't think that it would make a difference, no. Because it's
so by the books.
Yeah, well, and it's not so by the books, but I would say the level of experience that person has means astronomically more than any.
Have you ever experienced dilation of time when you're in stressful environments, like like a car crash where maybe the mother survives, that the kid doesn't, or something like that?
Yeah.
Similar to psychedelics, but just from extreme stress and trauma? And what was that like? And maybe even when you saw your friend.
Yeah, you know, it's weird actually. So I used to be I was very emotional about it for a long time, and like I couldn't, like that subject, I couldn't like go onto it without being outwardly emotional, basically. Or no, I avoided it because I didn't want to be.
Do you think it's bad for people to see you cry?
No. It's just for me personally, like that's like it's like a very personal thing, you know. And it's not like, I don't know if that's like if it's like a masculinity thing, but I don't think that's for other people. I think that's something that like you're supposed to deal with yourself. Like I wouldn't cry to someone. But if I were upset, I might cry, and then I would go talk to someone afterwards.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't go to them crying. You know, I think that like that crying is like a personal thing. Have you ever cried
mid-conversation?
Not that I can think of. I'm sure I have. Yeah. You know, I'm sure, but not that I can like think of right offhand.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I'm not a very like outwardly emotional person. And actually, it's kind of interesting because my mom really isn't either. So I think that's kind of where I got it from. My dad is. He's like not like super emotional or anything, but he will convey emotion.
Does it feel good when you do though? Have you seen your dad cry?
Yeah. It's actually really unsettling. I don't know if you've ever seen either of your parents cry.
Sometimes, yeah, maybe.
But it's like, it's kind of unsettling. Like, it's like, sort of like, because they're supposed to be the one that has it all figured out. Mm-hmm. You're like center in the world. And then to see them like upset or distraught, you're like, whoa. You know, even as an adult, it's like, I think it triggers something in your mind that's like, things are not good.
Yeah.
You know, if your parents crying.
Mm-hmm. But that's a big thing of society is like normally when something cries, it's a baby crying because something's wrong. But I think grown up, I mean, have you cried of gratitude? Like the best thing in your life ever happened? Did you?
No, but I feel that like I've felt that emotional pull. Mm-hmm. You know, for me, it doesn't manifest strongly enough that I cry. Mm-hmm. But I've like when my sister graduated from college, like I was super stoked for her, man. Like I was so happy for her, but it wasn't like I wasn't gonna break down in tears.
Yeah.
So you know, I mean, like you know, I'm an emotional person. I'm not closed off. Mm-hmm. But I think my emotional threshold, it's like there reaches a point where I can only express so much, and then that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And like anything else outside of that, I have to like deal with internally and not externally.
Yeah. So to go back to the time dilation during extreme trauma.
Slows time down, I would say. And I feel like
times down.
Slows slows down.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in heightened senses, you know, like your everything, like, you know, what you hear, what you smell, what you feel, everything is very like it's logged in memory very articulately. Mm-hmm. And that's like, and I think that's where a lot of those, like the PTSD flashbacks, I could see how people have that.
Because can you vividly go back to that day?
Yeah, totally.
Is it numbed more now that you've experienced it so much?
Yeah, definitely. And I don't know. And see, that's kind of interesting because I don't know if it's because of what I do and the work that I've been in, mm-hmm. or it's just time healing the wounds in my psyche and me processing it as a more mature person. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I would say it's, you know, as is anything, it's multiple factors all working at once, you know? But I would say also that like loss, you know, the reason and like, you know, it's actually like when I got my hand tattooed on a kind of a whim, mm-hmm. and I was like, dumbass. Why did I do that? That was like,
you'll always remember? Or what?
Yeah. Well, and the reason I got it, I wanted a reminder that what this person gave, and then like it was weird because it was like all this had happened, and one thing that changed me was when we were at the funeral, and it was rough, man. It was an open casket funeral, and how many people were there blew my mind. Like, I have no idea about numbers, but if I had to guess, like over 200 people.
Holy cow.
And so like, and then like the people that would talk were like, this dude, you know, did this or that for me or this or that, you know what I mean? And it was just like thing after thing after thing after thing. And like it, in my mind, that kind of clicked. And I was like, the only thing that matters at the end of the day, like when you're dead and gone, you know, for him, how people remember you. You know, like how does you know, how is your legacy gonna live?
Yeah, I've kind of pondered an interesting thing about that. I heard Duncan Trussell say it first, but it's like when you say something like that, what if it's like saying when you wake up in the morning being like, man, I really hope those people in that dream I just had liked me or like still talk about me, you know? Like, I mean, do you really think that this whole life will hold value? I mean, suffering in the now is very real.
See, yeah, and then that's where it gets a little squirrely because reality is real because you experience it. You know, your pain and suffering and joy and like all those things are the baseline of reality. Wait, okay, you should rephrase your question just go over it one more time. Oh, there's no question. No.
I mean, just like, do you think that this is real?
I would say to the degree that we can perceive it, yes. You know, because all of it's kind of a hallucination in reality because you're looking at things, something through your eyes, which is an organ. It's being processed by your brain and then converted into an image that's being projected into your subconscious and conscious. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, everyone, you know, and I kind of like, I don't know if you've ever heard this one that like everyone's their own God. Oh, you know, you're the only person that lives inside your head. Mm-hmm. You're the God of your own universe, and you can make whatever happen. You know, you could stand up and walk out of here right now if you wanted, because it's your world and you can choose.
Comes back to the taking responsibility.
Yeah, and it's your reality, man. Yeah. It's yours. Like, there's no one else. there's no one else living in your head telling you what to do, man.
But it's
like,
still hard, even once you come to that conclusion. Like, how did one day? I mean, you
no,
said
and it was gradual. It was gradual and painful over a long period of time, and a lot of it was from getting kind of broken down a lot. You know, like not like in a bad way, but like to be forced to reevaluate. Mm-hmm. And part of that, like when I lived at the station, a lot of, you know, one thing that was really like I understood more, or I didn't get before, but I understand now, is they were really harsh on us, man. Like, if you did something wrong, they like, and it wasn't like mean, like they would yell in your face. It wasn't like that. It was like they would roast you. And they'd call you out. Mm-hmm. And you'd be like at drill or something. They were like, oh yeah, when so-and-so like didn't do that on this call. Yeah. And everyone would be like, you know, like, mm-hmm. But it was like, it was very like helpful for me personally, because it taught me like, because you can't have thin skin at a fire department. Yeah. You can't be sensitive.
Were you ever bullied, or was that the first time you ever experienced people kind of making a joke of you?
No, actually, you know, I don't know. Bullied. See, I had older siblings that I fought with. Okay, yeah. You know, so I mean, bullied is kind of a relative term, a little bit there. You know, like, I would say no one was ever cruel to me, ever. Mm-hmm. Especially in the fire service. I mean, just as a person, I've never had anyone be like that directly awful or cruel to me that I wasn't already friends with and had good reason for them to whatever, you know, whatever personal thing was going on. But no, I've never had anyone in the fire service like bully me. And I've had people be less than nice, and they're kind of, but usually it's the people that are a little bit kind of rougher, gruffer people.
If you and one person, maybe you and a paramedic really don't jive, can you ask to be on a different person's crew, or are you kind of stuck with who you get? Because I imagine that'd be really hard.
That depends on whether you're paid or volunteering.
Yeah. So why is there such a big volunteer? Shouldn't these people get paid for their time?
You know, I think part of it's a money thing, because it's like you have these small rural communities, and they don't generate the kind of tax money that would pay for, one, a transport service, and two, for a full-time paid staff for a fire department, no less EMS.
But do you still work 48 hours, but unpaid?
No. So that's as a resident. Like, that's your resident contract.
That's if you work, if you
live there. If you live there and you're living there for free, so I should explain that a little bit better. So I was living there, and I had to work 48.96. And if I took a class, like if I took EMT, like if I took another level, continued education, I would pay for it up front, and when I passed the class, they would reimburse me. Okay. Like, they would pay me back in full. Yeah. So I mean, like, there's a lot of benefits to living there, but they're using you to serve the community.
Wait, so they gave you housing but didn't pay you. So how would you pay for food and stuff? Like, is that sustainable?
You kind of just gotta make it work.
Yeah.
You can work. I mean, you really have a job outside of that.
So you have to have a job outside of being...
For the most part, unless you're kind of, you know, and like there were times where I was unemployed when I was there, and times where I was not employed. And the times that I wasn't employed were harder financially, and they were harder because you don't have anything to really do. So you kind of just hang out there. And so you just go on calls. And not the 48 hours. I just stayed there all the time. Yeah. I lived there. It was my house.
I mean the 96 hours off.
Yeah, the 96 hours off, I'd still be there. And I'd still go on calls, and... You know? Yeah. And I never really got away from it. But no, it's, you know, and they try to provide the help that they can, but there's a balance there, because really that fire department is there to serve that community. You know, it's not for the betterment of me of my career. That department exists so that the people of that district can have reliable service in times of need. So, I mean, you know, there's kind of like a division there, but as far as like your question of paid EMS, of paid EMS if you didn't like your partner, I have heard of circumstances where someone was like, hey, this person makes me feel uncomfortable, and they transferred them out. They didn't work together anymore.
What if you're a paramedic but you feel like your EMT's the littlest bit incompetent? Like, you feel like they might black out when I need them the most. Can you voice that?
You have to manage it. I mean, you can ask, but I would say for them, I mean, and it depends on your supervisor and your stat, like all those things. But I would say if you came to them with that, they'd be like, well, help them. Oh, yeah. Help them. You want them to do good on calls for you, then make sure they can, kind of thing, you know? And Because that's like mentorship is huge. It's huge. It's like everything in EMS, man. If you don't have good mentors, you're not gonna have the confidence to move forward.
Yeah.
Very well. It would be a lot harder. You know, if I go back and like I've had, God man, like 10 plus people that have like gone out of their way in really big ways to help me and push me forward in my career and my education, that if without them, I would not be where I am.
And do you pay that forward by, are you mentoring other people now?
Yeah. I mean, well, to the degree that you can, you know, it's one of those things. It's very delicate where like, I don't know it all. I've only been doing this for 3.5 years. That's a blink of an eye. That's not very long at all. Mm-hmm. And I do have wisdom that I've picked up in that time and an experience that could help someone, especially in that first few years of doing it.
Mm-hmm. What would that be? That might be hard to ask.
Well, like, I would say more of a mindset
of what? Take responsibility.
Well, more of a mindset of how, of your purpose, of why you're there and what you're doing, mm-hmm. you know? Like if you're saying, okay, I'm voluntarily putting myself in a situation where I'm going to have to deal with traumatic events. Mm-hmm. I'm going to have to deal with people dying. And it could be someone that I know because I'm doing it at a rural department in my community. Yeah. You have to be pretty freaking certain of why you're doing it. You can't have no answer for that question. Because without any purpose, without any reason that you're doing it, if you're just doing it to do it, or doing it for the t-shirt, or doing it for the bragging rights, mm-hmm. then you're not going to last. You're going to fall apart, and it'll be harmful to that person, you know, psychologically. That you need reason, and you need to like believe in it. You need to be like, I'm choosing to do this because I want to, one, and mm-hmm. two, because like I want to do what I can to make a difference in someone else's life. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of like, it's hard. Like I guess I have trouble with that. Like you have to it's almost like you have to think you're the shit, and you also have to be extremely humble at the same time. Yeah. You know, that there's like a, you know, mm-hmm. and I think that comes from like, and the people that I know that are the best are the ones who are the most humble. The people that I know in EMS that are like the best medics I know are the medics that are the most humble and would be least likely to take or give credit to themselves. Yeah. So, you know, and that kind of like from my evolution of when I started out, I was like, I'm an EMT now, you know, I'm, you know, this or that. And then through doing it, it's like you kind of get, well, at first you roll up in there and you're like, I'm the shit. And then you just get bashed down immediately. Yeah. You know, you're going to mess up. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to do the wrong thing. And you're just going to get punished. Just run through the ringer because you came in. And especially like, you know, because I came in kind of cocky. Like I had it all figured out. Yeah. And then so the second I was making mistakes, my captains took it upon themselves to roast me. But it was good, you know? It's like you have to like kill that ego out because it's not
about you.
It's not about you, man. And it's not about it's not about EMS either. It's not about like it's not about your department. It's not about, you know, it's about this person that you're trying to help. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like, it's very easy to get convoluted into those things. And that like I think about it often, you know, like the way that you see yourself mm-hmm. as far as like doing this job, you know, how do I see myself as a person of like, am I this like awesome badass that like helps people all over the place? Or am I like this person, well, or am I this person that's doing this just for my own self-satisfaction? Am I doing this? Is it actually selfish? Am I actually doing this because saving someone else makes me feel so good about myself that that's the feeling that I'm chasing? Mm-hmm. And I've asked myself that question too, and honestly, I really don't know the answer. Mm-hmm. You know, like it's a like a varied mesh of all those things. Yeah, that kind of goes all a spectrum. Yeah, and I think that there's, you know, and I think with every spectrum, the place to be is the middle. Yep. You know, like because you have to have some of that. You have to think that you're good, and you have to be confident in yourself, but you can't, you know, be a narcissistic asshole about it either.
Yeah, but you can't be too humble. If you look up the definition of humble, it's like of having low
self-esteem.
Yeah, pretty much, or low.
Really,
like low
and
quality.
Like in so many words though. Or is that like, is that pretty much verbatim? Like
if you look up the definition of low self-esteem, of humble, it's like, that's something I don't want to be. Yeah. Seriously, anyone look it up. But so it's a,
you know, so then why is it so valuable in our society, or not in our society, but I guess in lots of professions, it's like kind of expected.
I think people who don't do it capitalize on other people being humble so that they can get ahead. in a lot of ways. Because if you know, I think by having other people stay hush about their accomplishments, you kind of stand out. So I think it's almost something people use like subtly, like, hey, you should be humble.
But also for
not
me,
everyone.
For me, I would say like that plays into my perspective of someone. Like you could tell me that, or like, okay, like say someone was like, hey man, like, you know, we've had this conversation, and a week from now someone's like, hey, you know, Tiger, like, you know, works in an orphanage. And I'd be like, damn, that's pretty fucking legit, man. Like that's the right thing to do. Or, you know, you're doing good work, and you didn't tell me about it. You didn't say a word about it while we were having this conversation. Yeah. That would mean more to me than if you were like, so, you know, when I help out at the orphanage, like... Yeah,
well, so do you just take that... Because, I mean, what if I totally did, and no one ever told you, though? So do you, when you go into any conversation with people...
No, so that's not... And that's a skewed perspective.
Yeah.
But I think that's something that I do kind of inherently, and then I think other people do, too. That if someone, like... If I hear about someone donating money to a charity, if I heard about it because they're broadcasting it, I don't really give a shit. I'm like, cool, man, pat yourself on the back. But if you hear it outside of that person, then it's
means more.
Yeah,
that's such a strange thing. People have always.
I mean, do you feel that same way? Like, no?
I think if you're doing the right thing for the wrong reasons, you're still doing the right thing. The impact that you're making is still the same. Like people say, you can be selfish by donating to charity if you
because you're giving
to feel good. I'm like. The impact that you're making on the world is the same, and I think that's it. I mean,
I think that there's two types of people. You know, that the one person that does it humbly. Now that you got me stuck on that, humble is a weird word. Yeah. But someone that does it humbly, I think, gains more personally.
So then you're doing it for personal thing. If you're gaining more from it personally, like, are you doing it for personal gain? Like even to just feel good about yourself. Like,
I would say inherently yes.
It's worth less if you do it to feel good about yourself.
Worth less to who though? I would say to the person that you're helping, that's irrelevant.
Yes, that's
as long as they're being and I see where you're coming from. That as long as that person's being helped, the motivations and factors that played into you doing that thing are somewhat irrelevant. But at the same time, it's like when people like, it's like YouTubers, they'll go out and they'll give like homeless people money, but it's like you're filming yourself doing it. Like you're just an asshole, you know, like and obviously you're making publicity and inherent and money, therefore, through doing that. So you're really helping those people?
Yeah, yes, of course they are. They're redistributing wealth.
Yeah, but who gains more? So, okay, now I've got it. Yeah. So if you are benefiting more than the person that you're helping, then it's wrong. Okay. So let's say I'm a YouTuber and I walk around and I'm like, here, I'm going to buy these homeless people Nikes and, new shit and, give them $100 a piece.
Yeah.
And then I film it.
Let's make it easy. And you go up and give a homeless man 10 grand, but you get 15 grand from ad revenue. You still made such a large impact on that person's life, and you got paid for your time.
Yes. I feel like that's a little squirrely though, like that there's something there that's kind of, that's part of technology though too. I think that you can see things so easily that you can broadcast, like within, however many minutes of you putting this online, how many people will see it, that kind of, it's like
10. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
No.
Hey man, you had me on now. You're going to have at least 11.
No, but yeah, I don't know. But social media and it all adds kind of quite a bit. And
it's like an inflated ego, that people in our generation. It's like you have this broadcasted social media version of yourself, and that kind of inflates people's egos, because you're trying to broadcast, and I think it makes people unhappy a little bit too, because they're trying to live up to. I'm sure you've heard, it's been talked about in a few podcasts that it's a good evolutionary strategy to look at your neighbor. If I'm living next to someone, and we're both farmers, and they're producing twice the crops that I am, I'm gonna be like, what the fuck? What am I doing wrong? How do I need to fix that?
Yeah.
And evolutionarily, that's a really good instinct to have. But then you come to modern times, and who's your neighbors? The people you see on TV, the people that you scroll by on social media, and those people are broadcasting a false image of their lives, just You know what I mean? Like, and I think that, you know, you're trying to portray this best version of yourself online, which that's what people do. But that, like, that instinct of comparison is like, you know, it's like comparison's the thief of joy, you know, like you.
Do you think people shouldn't put their best image out online, or, you know?
No, I think that it's more important to have an honest conversation about what the psychology is that goes into social media and why people are so into it and why people do it. And I think that, like, because I had a realization about that was actually, you know, for when I was in a deep depressive state and I was experimenting with hallucinogens, that was a realization that I had, a trip realization, was that everything everyone like, in my mind, everything everyone posts on Facebook or social media is for attention. Because why else would you be posting it? You're wanting people to look at it. You're wanting people to see it. But what if you're
raising awareness for something good? Like, I post these on social media.
Yes. You know, but do you see like a personal post? We'll subdivide it in there. Okay. That when you're posting a personal post, you want other people to see it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have posted it. And by de facto, you're putting something out there looking for attention. And I think that like the psychological implications of that on a whole society are larger than people think. And that, you know, in the next 20 years, and I'm not, you know, obviously I'm not an expert, I'm just a dumb EMT, but it'll have huge effects on the generations to come. You know, the kids that are like 10, 11 right now, you know, my girlfriend, her younger brother, I think he's 11 or something like that. Could not, like, 11-year-old me could never hang out with him. I would have not known anything that he was about. I wouldn't have understood it. I wouldn't have.
Do you think he's smarter than 11-year-olds? Because no, I think generations are getting smarter with technology.
I think that the technology is a tool that helps you be smarter, but I think that the actual people are, I don't know if, I wouldn't say getting dumber, but I would say it's like you have a crutch. Like, I don't have to memorize things. Like even, like, see, as a paramedic.
That saves you time, though, if anything.
Yes, but it makes you weaker.
It
makes you, like, take that phone away. And then you're more useless than you would have been if you would have never had the phone in the first place. That's where I think, like, you know, and I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
Yeah.
No, continue. I'm curious.
Do you browse Reddit? I think you can learn so much from the internet as long as it's used. I think almost the internet's kind of like eating food. Like, you can just eat fast food of just scrolling through your Facebook feed, or you could eat more nutritious stuff by like, I watched how to audio engineer. I watched how to video engineer. You know, like you can eat nutritious food, where I think the internet has the capability to make the next generation. I think anyone who's younger than me will be smarter than I am right now. And I think
because, but are they smarter biologically, or are they smarter because of technology?
Because of technology. That's totally I think technology makes people smarter. Watch a 1940s or 50s movie. It's like a brain dead person made it, right?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like things are, and maybe it's just
but I would say also the amount of effort that went in, you know, like if you were in that time period and you were going to do this, like what we're doing right now, not only would it be astronomically more expensive, but the amount of work and production quality that would go into it would be like insanely more work than you did, and it would be way less quality product.
And because of that, only the very rich few get to control what everyone thinks.
Yes.
So
put out media.
Yeah, everyone was just eating propaganda for the longest time, which is like worse than fast food, you know?
Yeah.
And now finally people get to choose what they're eating. You know, you can choose, are you just consuming the
See, but there's also, I would say that there's devils that live in free choice as well. You know, that like with so much information readily at our fingertips, that it becomes that much harder to sort through what's BS and what's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the only downside of it is that you stop being bored and you stop kind of having these meditative states.
Yeah, and that's what I was thinking about that too with, you know, younger kids. It's like they're never bored, man. Or if they, you know, or the second they don't have some sort of technology in front of them, they are like unbearably bored.
Yeah.
The concept of like going outside and like hitting sticks on trees or something has never occurred to them. It's not, you know? And I kind of remember that when I was like, probably you too, when you were younger, it's like you'd be like bored at your house and you just like go outside in your driveway and just throw rocks at the ground, like
do anything.
Break sticks or throw a basketball or whatever.
But little kids could hypothetically, like, if I was 8 and someone pushed me in the right direction where it's like, oh shit, I could be learning shit right now. But kids aren't really necessarily future motivated. It's almost like the future doesn't exist to a kid.
No, but I also think that that's for good reason. You know,
just for
because kids they're more delicate.
Yeah.
They're more delicate, and they're more like the process of growing up is a delicate and complicated one, and that you kind of need that innocence. That people need to be innocent until a certain point, and if you're innocent for too long, things go very wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not innocent too early, like if you lose that innocence too early, things also go very wrong.
Did you lose your innocence early, or did you?
No. You know, I would say no. You know, but my immediate answer would be no. You know, I wasn't like, I didn't have anything horribly traumatic happen to me when I was like
young,
12 or 11 or something. And you know, from the time that I was about 14, I was out in the world on my own to some degree.
Wow.
You know, I still had my parents. Like you know, like they would help me if I needed it. I could go stay there, but I really wasn't like I was. You know, between my friends' houses, at their house, you know, like that kind of bouncing around, being on your own teenager kind of thing. And my parents were really cool and supportive, and were never like, pull it together, loser. Like, sort of, you know, they were just like, you're going to do what you're going to do kind of thing and figure it out on your own. And, but I always knew I had that to go back to. So, you know what I mean? Like, there was...
Do you think the safety net... A lot of people say, like, if you move to LA, you can't have a safety net. But I think, I don't know, because then they're like, then you won't actually just pursue it the 110%. But I think having a safety net,
I think having a safety, I think not having a safety net stops a lot of people that could do a lot of good for the world from doing it.
Yeah. So
you know, I think that like there are people that have very high potential and they don't have any sort of support system in their life, and that it stops them, it holds them back from achieving things that would benefit other people.
Yeah, I think that's my biggest thing with this. It'd be cool to get to a point where you can see the potential in younger people and be like, here, because I think young people's main thing is financial stress, in terms of how they're going to help the world and sustain themselves. So just being alive is expensive, you know?
Well, and I think that part of that too, I don't know, I'm actually I'll come out and say it, I'm a super big Jordan Peterson fan.
Okay. Yeah.
So, like, not like, you know, like crazy off the charts, but I've read the dude's books. So, you know, as far as like, I think that he has a really good answer to that, and that it's the way to help the world. Like, you know, it's like people are idealistic when you're young. Like when you're like 20 or like 18, you're like, I'm gonna save the world, like let's do this thing kind of thing. And then by 25 or 26, your hopes have been dashed to the point where you've had to reevaluate those ideas. You know, but I think the way to change the world or save the world or help the world or help other people is to make yourself better.
Help yourself, your family, your community.
Yep. Yeah, I'm sure you're familiar with the
I love Jordan
literature.
I haven't read his books too much, but I just watched him on Joe Rogan and stuff like that, and I think he has a lot of good things to say.
I think he's one of those people that he's very, because I kind of relate to that he kind of says weird shit when he's put on the spot, and I kind of do too. You know, I'm very like rambling and sprawled out, but when I read what he like, you know, has written, it's like his books are they're a lot more organized, and like, not that he's not organized when he speaks, but he's able to go like in depth the way that he needs to convey his ideas. You know, that when he's on Joe Rogan and he's just like talking about this or that, it's like he can't say enough at the same time to like build a picture of what he's talking about. And then when you read his actual books, you know, I read 12 Rules for Life, and I actually try to live my life by him.
Right.
100%, because they're all good. You know, it's like there's.
Do you have your own rules for life? And what would they be?
You know, I would say maybe an edited version. I would say number 1's tell the truth. You know, tell the truth, and I would say first to yourself. Like 100%, you have to be honest with yourself, brutally honest. Like to a point of, you know, like you can't send yourself into a spiraling depression, but you can't be like, oh, I have like 10 things that are sliding off the end right now, and it's cool, man. Yeah, you can't do that. You know, and treat yourself like someone you're responsible for. It's another one of my, you know, favorite rules of his. It's like, because you are responsible for yourself, so treat yourself like someone you're taking care of, that you're responsible, you know, that you need to help and nurture. Yeah. Because I think that like it's hard to do self-care for me too. Like, I don't know about you, but the self-care of like taking time to yourself, you know. I'm sure you work very hard doing this podcast.
Generous and kind, but yeah, kind of.
You know, I mean, well, and I would say I'm sure you enjoy this part, but getting to this point is
8 hours of editing, maybe not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, but that work is worth it, and I would say that's how EMS is too, and that's how life is. You know, it's like there's a lot of painful hard work involved, but if you enjoy the finished product, then was it worth it?
The finished product of, so you're on your deathbed and you're just like, all right, that was a good finished product.
All right, yeah, we sent it, you know.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas of what it's going to be like? Maybe influenced by psychedelics, or is it influenced by your experiences?
You know, I'm kind of like, I'm not really a religious or spiritual person particularly.
Or spiritual?
No, not really.
Whoa, you don't even believe?
No, I'm kind of like
in any energy or power or being.
I mean, I believe in science. Kind of, you know, and it's not like deeper. It's deeper than that, you know. I have meaning in my life, and I have like, I guess, spirituality. To say I'm not spiritual is kind of not true, but not classic spirituality, and not spirituality that's like tied to the afterlife. You know, I find meaning in my life, and I find like purpose and reason, and you know, and all the things that help me orient myself in the world. But I don't base it on anything that I think may or may not happen after I die. You know, like whatever that is, I don't know the answer to, and I don't think anyone does. Yeah. You know, so
I know.
But it's like worrying about a problem that you can't fix. You know, it's like, and it's worth thinking about, but it's not worth agonizing over. You know, I wouldn't agonize over what it's going to be like to die the same way I wouldn't agonize over how much I'm going to have to pay back on my taxes next year. You know,
you have to agonize over, couldn't you? So I think that's another thing that society almost fear mongers, like death's going to be the worst thing that ever happened to you. Well, but if you think about it, it's the time in your life at the end where everything's accomplished and you're like, you can just set down, I don't have to pay a mortgage anymore, I don't have to text friends back, I don't anything.
But I think that's the time that you would want to.
You don't have any.
You know, like it's like the more freedom is taken away from you, the more you want it back. But I also think, like, in my mind, in my mind, death is like to cease to exist.
You think you'll cease to exist?
Yeah, completely. That like that the thing that made, like, you know, the me that I was is going to be no longer existing. Like that I will not exist. That my consciousness will be like.
Yeah.
Like, do you remember the time you were before you were born? Do you remember being in the womb? Yeah. It's going to be like that. That's like, in my mind, that's what, you know, that's the best picture that I can personally conjure up.
Yeah. I like that. That's a good one.
You know, I mean, and that sounds kind of, it's a little bit negative almost. I mean, and not to say that I know, you know, that's just my best guess, you know, and I'd like to think there's something, you know, cool, or like, you know, you float through the energy of the universe, you know, like infinitely traveling through infinite cosmos and reality, but who knows? You know?
So you're just enjoying it while you're here?
Yeah.
I think this is a really good podcast.
Yeah.
If you're ready to call it, yeah. I mean,
are you, how sweaty are you at this point?
I'm decent, you know?
Oh man, I'm sweating up a storm over here. I feel like, I feel like I'm sitting in a shower chair.
Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Yeah. Everyone, if you liked it, like, subscribe. If you know someone who'd be good to have on here, email me at tygruber@gmail.com. We'll make it happen. All right. Lots of love, everyone. Catch you later.
Yep.